The ocean has always harbored legends that blur the line between myth and reality, but perhaps none are as terrifying as the tales that emerged from the storm-lashed waters of the North Atlantic. For centuries, hardened sailors would return to port with accounts so extraordinary that landlubbers dismissed them as the ravings of men too long at sea. They spoke of something monstrous lurking in the depths, a creature so immense it could be mistaken for an island, until it moved, revealing tentacles thick as ship masts and longer than cathedral spires. This was the Kraken, the ultimate sea monster of maritime folklore. The earliest recorded accounts of Kraken encounters date back to the 12th century, when Norse sailors described meeting what they called hafgufa, or sea mist, creatures so vast they created their own weather systems. These weren't mere fishing tales told over ale in taverns. Ship logs, insurance claims, and official naval reports documented encounters with something that defied explanation, something that could wrap its arms around the largest vessels and drag them to the abyss without leaving a trace. Captain Magnus Anderson's account from 1752 represents one of the most detailed Kraken encounters ever recorded. His merchant vessel was becalmed in the North Atlantic when the crew noticed what appeared to be a small island where none should exist. As they approached to investigate, the so-called island began to move. Massive tentacles, each thicker than the ship's mainmast, erupted from the water around them. The creature's body, Anderson estimated, stretched nearly 150 feet in length, its flesh a mottled reddish-brown that glistened in the pale Arctic light. What saved Anderson's crew was their quick thinking. Rather than attempting to fight the creature or flee in panic, they began firing their cannons and making as much noise as possible. The Kraken, apparently startled or irritated by the commotion, released its grip on the ship and sank beneath the waves, leaving behind a whirlpool so powerful it spun the vessel like a child's toy. For centuries, such accounts were relegated to the realm of sailors' superstitions and maritime mythology. The scientific establishment dismissed the Kraken as a combination of exaggerated encounters with large whales, floating debris, and the notorious unreliability of seafaring witnesses under stress. The ocean, they argued, could not possibly harbor creatures of such impossible dimensions. Then, in 1857, everything changed. Danish zoologist Japetus Steenstrup examined the beak of what appeared to be an enormous squid recovered from the stomach of a sperm whale. The specimen was unlike anything in the known scientific record, suggesting a cephalopod of extraordinary size. Over the following decades, more evidence began to surface. Massive tentacles washing ashore after storms, circular scars on whales that could only have been made by sucker marks of incredible size, and eventually, in 1887, the first complete specimen of what would be classified as Architeuthis dux, the giant squid. Modern marine biology has confirmed what ancient mariners long suspected. The ocean does indeed harbor creatures of almost mythical proportions. Giant squids, reaching lengths of up to 60 feet, inhabit the deep waters of the world's oceans, particularly in the North Atlantic, where Kraken sightings were most common. Even more recently, scientists have documented the colossal squid, Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni, which can grow even larger and possesses rotating hooks on its tentacles, capable of tearing through flesh and steel alike. These discoveries validate many historical Kraken encounters, while revealing why such creatures remained hidden for so long. Giant squids are deep water dwellers, typically found at depths between 900 and 3,000 feet, far below the reach of traditional fishing methods. They surface only rarely, usually when injured, dying, or in pursuit of prey. Their soft bodies decompose rapidly, leaving little evidence of their existence. But the most chilling aspect of giant squid biology is their strength. Modern calculations suggest that a large specimen could indeed grapple with a sailing ship, particularly smaller vessels common in earlier centuries. Their tentacles, lined with hundreds of powerful suckers, can exert tremendous grip pressure. The rotating hooks found on some species could easily puncture wooden hulls or shred canvas sails. Recent underwater footage has captured giant squids in their natural habitat, revealing creatures of alien intelligence and predatory efficiency. Their movements are fluid yet purposeful, their large eyes capable of detecting the faintest bioluminescent signals in the eternal darkness of the deep. When threatened or hunting, they can change color instantly, their skin flashing patterns of communication or camouflage that scientists are only beginning to understand. Perhaps most unsettling is the realization that giant squids are likely not the largest cephalopods in the ocean. deep-sea exploration continues to reveal new species and larger specimens. In 2003, researchers discovered tentacle fragments from what may have been a squid exceeding 100 feet in length. Sonar contacts in deep ocean trenches have detected moving objects of enormous size that remain unidentified and uncaptured. The Kraken legend persists because it touches something primal in our relationship with the sea. These creatures represent the ocean's capacity to hide monsters of unimaginable scale, predators that dwarf anything on land. In the crushing darkness of the deep, where pressure would implode human bodies and cold would freeze blood in minutes, giants move through their liquid domain with deadly grace. Modern shipping has largely eliminated the threat of Kraken attacks on surface vessels. Steel hulls and diesel engines provide protection that wooden sailing ships never possessed. Yet submarine crews operating at extreme depths report occasional encounters with giant cephalopods, creatures that approach their vessels with curiosity or aggression, their massive eyes reflecting the submersible's lights before disappearing into the abyss. The North Atlantic continues to yield evidence of these deep-sea leviathans. Fishing nets occasionally bring up tentacle fragments or beaks from specimens that may have been even larger than those already documented. Whales surface bearing fresh scars from battles with giant squids, suggesting that epic encounters between these titans continue in the hidden depths. As our technology advances and we penetrate deeper into the ocean's mysteries, the line between legend and reality continues to blur. The Kraken may have been vindicated by science, but the seas still hold secrets that strain credibility. Sonar operators report contacts suggesting creatures of impossible size moving through abyssal plains. Deep-sea cameras capture shadows and movements that defy classification. The ancient terror of the Kraken reminds us that the ocean remains largely unexplored, its deepest regions as alien and dangerous as any extraterrestrial world. In those crushing depths, where sunlight has never penetrated and the pressure could turn steel into powder, creatures of legend may still be waiting, coiled in the darkness, ready to rise from the deep and remind us that we are visitors in their domain. The next time you stand at the ocean's edge and gaze into its blue immensity, remember that somewhere beneath those waves, giants move through the eternal night. The Kraken may be real, but that only makes the ocean more mysterious, not less. In confirming one legend, science has opened the door to countless others, each more terrifying than the last. If you're fascinated by these tentacled titans of the deep, don't let this discovery slip through your fingers like a Kraken vanishing into the abyss. Hit that subscribe button now. It's your lifeline to more incredible ocean mysteries that'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the depths below. Each subscription helps us dive deeper into the unknown, and trust me, we've only just scratched the surface of what lurks beneath the waves. Now, let's continue our journey into even stranger waters. Story 2. The Umibozu Sea Monster, Japan's Phantom of the Pacific. From the tentacled terrors of the North Atlantic, we now sail to the volcanic waters of the Pacific, where Japanese mariners have long whispered of an entity so strange and malevolent that its very name strikes fear into the hearts of seasoned fishermen. In the folklore of Japan, few creatures inspire as much dread as the Umibozu, a mysterious sea monster whose appearances herald disaster and whose true nature remains one of the ocean's most perplexing enigmas. The Umibozu, literally meaning sea monk, derives its name from its most distinctive and unsettling feature, a massive, perfectly bald head that emerges from the waves like a living mountain. Unlike the tentacled kraken or the serpentine dragons of Western mythology, the Umibozu presents a form so alien and inexplicable that witnesses struggle to find words adequate to describe their encounters. Historical accounts from the Edo period describe the Umibozu as a colossal humanoid figure, sometimes reaching heights of 100 feet or more, with smooth, dark skin that glistens like wet stone. Its head, completely hairless and eerily human-like in proportion, rises from the ocean with no visible neck or shoulders, as if the creature were a living statue half buried in the seabed. Most disturbing are the accounts of its eyes, described as glowing orbs the size of temple drums that regard approaching vessels with an intelligence both ancient and malevolent. The creature's method of destruction is as mysterious as its appearance. Rather than attacking ships with claws or teeth, the Umibozu is said to simply approach vessels and demand that sailors provide it with a barrel. If the crew complies, the monster will use the barrel to scoop water from the sea and pour it over the ship until it sinks. If they refuse, the Umibozu will become enraged and destroy the vessel through unknown means, often by creating massive whirlpools or summoning devastating storms. This peculiar behavioral pattern has puzzled folklorists and marine researchers for centuries. Why would a sea monster require a barrel to sink ships? What purpose does this ritualistic destruction serve? The answers may lie not in supernatural explanations, but in the complex oceanographic phenomena that characterize Japan's coastal waters. The Japanese archipelago sits at the intersection of several major tectonic plates, creating one of the most geologically active marine environments on Earth. Underwater volcanic activity, seismic disturbances, and the collision of warm and cold ocean currents produce a constantly changing seascape where the impossible can suddenly become reality. Modern oceanographers have documented numerous phenomena in Japanese waters that could explain Umibozu sightings. Underwater landslides triggered by seismic activity can create sudden upheavals of sediment and debris that, when viewed from a distance, might resemble a massive head emerging from the water. The dark, mineral-rich sediment, common in volcanic regions, could account for the creature's characteristic coloration. More intriguing are the rogue waves and sudden waterspouts that frequently occur in these waters. The complex interaction between the Kuroshio current and the cold Oyashio current creates conditions perfect for the formation of massive, isolated waves that can appear seemingly from nowhere. These tsunami-like phenomena could explain not only the Umibozu's sudden appearances, but also its devastating effect on ships. The creature's demand for a barrel may reflect a distorted memory of a real survival technique. When confronted with a massive rogue wave or sudden waterspout, experienced sailors might attempt to lighten their vessel by jettisoning cargo, including barrels of water or sake. The act of throwing barrels overboard could have become mythologized over time into the monster's peculiar ritualistic demands. However, not all Umibozu encounters can be explained by natural phenomena. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, multiple witnesses reported seeing the creature in conditions of perfect calm when no seismic activity or unusual currents were present. These accounts describe the Umibozu rising slowly from depths that should have been too shallow to conceal something of its alleged size. One particularly well-documented incident occurred in 1903, when the crew of a fishing vessel operating near the Izu Peninsula reported an encounter that lasted nearly an hour. The sea was perfectly calm, with visibility extending for miles in every direction. According to the fishing captain's log, a massive dome-like structure began to emerge from the water approximately 200 meters from their vessel. As it rose, the structure revealed itself to be the top of an enormous bald head, smooth and dark gray in color. The head continued to emerge until what appeared to be shoulders became visible beneath the surface. The crew estimated the creature's visible height at over 60 feet, with an unknown portion remaining submerged. Most unsettling was the creature's behavior during this extended encounter. Rather than attacking or making demands, the Umibozu simply observed the fishing vessel, its massive eyes tracking the movements of the crew as they watched in terrified fascination. After nearly an hour, the creature slowly sank back beneath the waves, leaving no trace of its presence except a circular depression in the water that gradually filled in. This incident, recorded in official maritime logs and corroborated by multiple witnesses, defies conventional explanation. The water depth in the area was measured at only 150 feet, far too shallow to conceal a creature of the reported size. No seismic activity was recorded, and weather conditions remained stable throughout the encounter. The mystery deepens when considering the frequency of Umibozu sightings throughout Japanese history. Unlike many sea monsters that appear sporadically or in isolated incidents, the Umibozu has been reported consistently across centuries and in multiple locations around the Japanese islands. This persistence suggests either a natural phenomenon that regularly recurs or a population of creatures rather than a single entity. Recent advances in marine technology have allowed researchers to explore previously inaccessible depths around Japan, revealing underwater landscapes of extraordinary complexity. Deep-sea volcanic vents, underwater cave systems, and abyssal plains honeycomb the seafloor, creating countless hiding places for unknown species. The discovery of giant tube worms, bizarre deep-sea creatures, and chemosynthetic ecosystems in these regions proves that the Japanese waters harbor life forms as strange as any imagined by folklore. Some marine biologists have proposed that the Umibozu might represent encounters with an unknown species of giant cephalopod, similar to but distinct from the giant squids documented in other oceans. The smooth, dome-like head described by witnesses could be the mantle of an enormous squid species that lacks the prominent tentacles of its Atlantic cousins. The creature's ability to remain motionless for extended periods, and its apparent intelligence, would be consistent with cephalopod behavior. This theory gained support from the discovery of unique deep-sea species endemic to Japanese waters. The region's isolation by deep ocean trenches and its complex geology have created evolutionary conditions that favor the development of distinct species found nowhere else on Earth. An unknown giant cephalopod adapted to the specific conditions of the Japanese deep could potentially explain the consistent physical characteristics reported in Umibozu encounters. The cultural impact of the Umibozu extends far beyond maritime folklore. The creature has influenced Japanese art, literature, and spiritual beliefs for over a millennium. Buddhist and Shinto traditions incorporate the Umibozu as a manifestation of the ocean's spiritual power, a reminder that humans must approach the sea with respect and humility. In contemporary Japan, the Umibozu continues to capture public imagination. Modern fishermen still report unusual sightings that echo historical descriptions, and several unexplained shipping incidents in Japanese waters have been unofficially attributed to Umibozu encounters. While official investigations typically identify mechanical failure or human error as the cause, the persistence of these reports suggests that something in the Japanese seas continues to confound conventional explanation. The Umibozu represents more than just another sea monster legend. It embodies the Japanese understanding of the ocean as a living entity with its own consciousness and agenda. Unlike Western maritime traditions that often portray the sea as a chaotic force to be conquered, Japanese culture views the ocean as a complex being capable of judgment, mercy, and vengeance. As we continue to explore the depths around Japan, advanced sonar systems occasionally detect large, moving objects that don't match known marine life or geological features. These contacts, lasting only minutes before disappearing into deeper waters, fuel speculation that the Umibozu may be more than folklore. Whether the Umibozu is a misidentified natural phenomenon, an unknown species of deep-sea creature, or something that defies scientific classification entirely, its presence in Japanese waters serves as a reminder that the ocean still holds mysteries that challenge our understanding. In the volcanic depths of the Pacific, where tectonic forces reshape the seafloor and unknown currents carry secrets from the abyss, the bald-headed phantom continues its eternal watch, rising from the depths when conditions align in ways we don't yet comprehend. The next time you see a perfectly calm sea and think it looks peaceful, remember the Umibozu. Sometimes the ocean's greatest mysteries emerge not from storms or chaos, but from the deceptive tranquility of still waters, where something vast and patient waits beneath the surface, ready to remind us that we are merely visitors in a realm we barely understand. Story 3. The Sea of Japan's Ghost Ships, Vessels of the Damned. From the mysterious Umibozu emerging from Pacific depths, we now turn to one of the most haunting maritime phenomena of the modern era. In the treacherous waters of the Sea of Japan, a grim parade of vessels has been washing ashore for over 2 centuries, carrying cargo far more disturbing than any merchant's goods. The skeletal remains of crews who embarked on voyages they would never complete, or sometimes, no crew at all. These are the ghost ships of the Sea of Japan, wooden vessels that drift like maritime phantoms across one of the world's most dangerous bodies of water. Their holds filled with mysteries that forensic investigators and maritime authorities struggle to solve. Each autumn and winter, as storm systems build across the North Pacific, these spectral craft begin their final voyages, carried by currents and winds toward the shores of Japan, where they arrive like messages from the dead. The phenomenon first gained documented attention in the early 1800s, when Japanese coastal communities began reporting the arrival of strange vessels, unlike any in their local fleets. These ships bore unfamiliar designs and construction techniques, suggesting origins from across the sea. More disturbing than their foreign appearance was their condition. Many arrived with their crews reduced to skeletal remains, while others showed evidence of hasty abandonment, with personal belongings scattered throughout the cabin but no sign of human presence. The mystery deepened throughout the 19th century as the frequency of these arrivals increased. Local authorities began maintaining detailed records of each ghost ship, noting construction details, cargo, and most importantly, the condition of any human remains found aboard. These logs reveal a pattern as consistent as it is chilling. The vessels typically arrive during winter months, often badly damaged, but still seaworthy enough to complete their final journey. The crews, when present, show signs of starvation, exposure, and in many cases, evidence of desperate attempts to survive at sea far longer than their provisions could sustain. Modern forensic analysis has revealed the likely origin of these ghost ships, the secretive waters of North Korea. The vessel construction, recovered personal items, and human remains all point to fishing boats that departed from North Korean ports, only to meet disaster in the unforgiving waters of the Sea of Japan. What transforms this from a simple maritime tragedy into a truly puzzling phenomenon is the question of why so many vessels suffer similar fates, and how they manage to drift such vast distances while maintaining enough structural integrity to reach Japanese shores. The Sea of Japan, known as the East Sea in Korea, presents some of the most challenging maritime conditions in the world. This marginal sea, nearly enclosed by the Japanese archipelago, Korean peninsula, and Russian Far East, creates a unique oceanographic environment where multiple current systems converge and clash. The warm Tsushima Current, flowing north from the East China Sea, meets the cold Lyman Current descending from the Arctic, creating temperature differentials that spawn violent storms and unpredictable weather patterns. During winter months, Siberian high-pressure systems generate winds that can exceed 100 miles per hour, creating seas that challenge even modern steel vessels. For wooden fishing boats, often overloaded and poorly maintained, these conditions become death traps. The combination of extreme cold, massive waves, and limited visibility creates scenarios where even experienced crews can become disoriented and lost. But weather alone doesn't explain the ghost ship phenomenon. The vessels that wash ashore in Japan have typically drifted for months across hundreds of miles of open ocean. This suggests either extraordinary durability in their construction or some factor that preserves them during their posthumous voyages. The answer may lie in the unique preservation conditions created by the Sea of Japan's cold temperatures and specific current patterns. The frigid waters act as a natural preservative, slowing the decomposition of both wooden hulls and human remains. Meanwhile, the circular current pattern in the northern Sea of Japan can trap debris for extended periods, allowing disabled vessels to remain afloat far longer than would be possible in warmer, more turbulent waters. This creates a maritime purgatory where dead ships can continue sailing for months, their skeletal crews maintained in a state of horrific preservation. Investigation of these ghost ships has revealed disturbing patterns in their cargo and equipment. Many carry fishing gear designed for illegal operations in foreign waters, suggesting they were engaged in poaching activities that took them far from safe harbors. Others show evidence of hasty modifications, with fuel tanks expanded and living quarters cramped to accommodate extended voyages. These modifications often compromise the vessel's seaworthiness, creating floating death traps that become coffins for their desperate crews. Perhaps most disturbing are the ghost ships that arrive completely empty, showing no sign of their crews except for scattered personal belongings and sometimes evidence of violence. These vessels present the most puzzling aspect of the phenomenon. How did their crews disappear so completely? The possibilities range from rescue by other vessels to abandonment in lifeboats that never reach safety, but the lack of distress signals or emergency beacon activations suggests more sinister explanations. Some investigators have proposed that certain ghost ships may be the result of human trafficking operations gone wrong, with crews and passengers lost to accidents or deliberate acts. The secretive nature of North Korean maritime activities makes verification impossible, but the pattern of fully equipped vessels arriving with no trace of their human cargo raises troubling questions about what desperate journeys these ships witnessed. The ghost ships also carry evidence of the isolated nation's internal struggles. Personal items recovered from the vessels paint a picture of extreme poverty and desperation. Crews carried minimal food supplies, worn clothing, and equipment that was often makeshift or improvised. Some vessels contain letters or personal documents that reveal the desperate circumstances driving fishermen to risk their lives in dangerous waters far from home. Recent years have seen an increase in ghost ship arrivals, with over 100 vessels washing ashore in Japan during peak years. This surge coincides with increasing economic pressure within North Korea and stricter enforcement of fishing regulations by neighboring countries. As legitimate fishing opportunities diminish, More crews appear willing to risk extended voyages into dangerous waters, creating a steady stream of potential ghost ships. The forensic examination of human remains found aboard these vessels has revealed the horrific final days of their crews. Evidence of starvation, exposure, and cannibalism points to desperate attempts to survive as vessels drifted helplessly across the sea. Some remains show signs of injuries consistent with accidents during extreme weather, while others suggest crew members may have fought over dwindling resources. Perhaps most haunting are the ghost ships that arrive with evidence of recent habitation despite carrying no living crew. These vessels show signs that someone survived the initial disaster and lived aboard the drifting ship for weeks or months before finally succumbing to the inevitable. Personal belongings are arranged as if someone had tried to maintain normal life routines, and makeshift repairs suggest determined efforts to keep the vessel functional even as hope faded. The psychological impact of these ghost ships extends beyond their immediate mystery. Coastal communities in Japan have developed elaborate rituals for dealing with the arrival of these vessels, treating them not merely as maritime debris, but as carriers of restless spirits. Local Buddhist temples perform ceremonies to honor the dead crews, while authorities handle the vessels with a respect that acknowledges their tragic human cargo. Modern technology has begun to shed light on the ghost ship phenomenon, but mysteries remain. Satellite tracking of ocean currents helps predict where disabled vessels might drift, while improved forensic techniques provide better insights into the fate of crews. However, the fundamental questions persist. Why do so many vessels suffer similar fates? And what drives crews to undertake such desperate voyages? The ghost ships of the Sea of Japan represent more than just maritime tragedies. They are floating testaments to human desperation, economic inequality, and the ocean's indifferent power. Each vessel carries the story of ordinary people driven to extraordinary risks by circumstances beyond their control. Their final voyages, completed after death, serve as haunting reminders that the sea shows no mercy to those who challenge its dominion unprepared. As political tensions and economic pressures continue to shape the Korean peninsula, the ghost ships will likely continue their macabre arrivals on Japanese shores. Each represents a human tragedy played out in the isolation of the open sea, where hope gradually gives way to despair, and the ocean claims another crew for its eternal collection. The next time you see a small fishing boat heading out to sea, remember the ghost ships and their skeletal crews. Their stories remind us that the ocean's greatest dangers often come not from monsters or natural phenomena, but from the desperate decisions of those with no other choice than to trust their lives to the mercy of waves that have no mercy to give. Story 4. Ilha da Queimada Grande, Brazil's forbidden island of death. From the ghostly vessels drifting across the Sea of Japan, we now venture to the warm waters of the South Atlantic, where off the coast of Brazil lies an island so dangerous that the government has banned all human access. Ilha da Queimada Grande, known ominously as Snake Island, harbors one of the most lethal concentrations of venomous serpents anywhere on Earth. This is not merely an island with snakes. It is an evolutionary laboratory where isolation has created a species so deadly that a single bite can kill a human within hours, and where the very ground writhes with thousands of golden-scaled killers. 25 miles off the São Paulo coast, Ilha da Queimada Grande rises from the Atlantic like a green jewel, its 106 acres of lush vegetation appearing deceptively pristine and inviting. The island's tropical forest canopy sways gently in ocean breezes, while white beaches ring its shoreline in a scene that could grace any travel brochure. Yet beneath this paradisiacal exterior lurks a biological nightmare that has earned the island its terrifying reputation. The island's sole human-made structure, an automated lighthouse, stands as a solitary monument to the last permanent residents who dared call this place home. The lighthouse keeper and his family vanished decades ago, under circumstances that local legends describe in chilling detail. According to these accounts, the family was awakened one night by the sound of snakes slithering across their roof and through their windows. In their desperate attempt to escape, they climbed the lighthouse tower, only to find serpents dropping from the trees onto the structure itself. Their bodies were never found, but locals believe they fell victim to the island's golden inhabitants. This is the domain of Bothrops insularis, the golden lancehead viper, a species found nowhere else on Earth. These serpents represent one of evolution's most deadly experiments, an island population that has adapted to their isolated environment by developing venom of extraordinary potency. While their mainland relatives, the common lancehead vipers, are dangerous enough, the golden lanceheads have evolved venom that is 3 to 5 times more powerful, capable of causing massive tissue destruction, kidney failure, and death within 6 hours of a bite. The reason for this evolutionary arms race lies in the island's unique ecosystem. Separated from the mainland approximately 11,000 years ago, when rising sea levels created the channel that isolates the island, the lancehead population found itself trapped with a limited food supply. The absence of ground-dwelling mammals forced the snakes to adapt to hunting birds, which required faster-acting venom to prevent prey from flying away after being bitten. Over thousands of generations, natural selection favored snakes with increasingly potent venom, creating a population of serpents so deadly that they represent one of the most venomous snakes in the Americas. The golden lancehead's venom contains a complex cocktail of enzymes and toxins that attack multiple body systems simultaneously, causing rapid cardiovascular collapse, massive internal bleeding, and necrosis of tissue around the bite site. Population estimates suggest that between 2,000 and 4,000 golden lanceheads inhabit the island, creating a density of approximately 1 snake per square meter in some areas. This concentration means that virtually every step on the island risks disturbing a potentially lethal serpent. The snakes occupy every ecological niche available, from ground-dwelling individuals that hunt among the leaf litter to arboreal specimens that drape themselves across branches, waiting for migrating birds. The island's isolation has created other unique evolutionary pressures that make the golden lanceheads even more formidable. Unlike most venomous snakes that reserve their venom for hunting and use dry bites as defensive warnings, the golden lanceheads inject venom with virtually every bite. This behavior, known as venom metering, reflects the scarcity of prey on the island. The snakes cannot afford to waste opportunities by delivering warning bites that allow potential food to escape. The snake's hunting strategy has also evolved to match their environment. Golden lanceheads exhibit unusual behavior for vipers, actively pursuing prey rather than relying solely on ambush tactics. They have been observed following bird migration routes, positioning themselves along flight paths, and even climbing to the highest points of trees to intercept passing seabirds. This active hunting style, combined with their deadly venom, makes them far more aggressive than their mainland cousins. The Brazilian government has classified Ilha da Queimada Grande as a protected area, banning all civilian access and allowing only authorized scientific expeditions under strict safety protocols. Researchers who visit the island must wear protective clothing, carry anti-venom, though none exists specifically for golden lancehead bites, and maintain constant vigilance against serpents that can strike from ground level or drop from overhead branches. Even these scientific visits are extremely hazardous. Researchers report that the constant threat of death creates a psychological pressure, unlike any other fieldwork environment. Every movement must be calculated, every step carefully placed. The sound of rustling leaves could indicate wind, falling debris, or a golden lancehead moving through the canopy above. The knowledge that a single mistake could result in an agonizing death within hours creates a level of stress that few scientific expeditions can match. The island's snake population faces its own existential challenges. The limited food supply that drove their evolution toward extreme toxicity now threatens their survival. Climate change has altered bird migration patterns, reducing the annual influx of prey species that the snakes depend upon. Scientists estimate that the golden lancehead population has declined by approximately 15% over the past decade, raising concerns about the species' long-term viability. Paradoxically, the snake's isolation and evolutionary uniqueness make them both a conservation priority and a source of scientific interest. The golden lancehead's venom contains compounds that could potentially be developed into life-saving medications. Preliminary research suggests that certain peptides in their venom might be useful in treating heart disease, blood clots, and other medical conditions. However, obtaining venom samples requires expeditions to one of the world's most dangerous locations. The illegal wildlife trade poses another threat to the island's serpent population. Golden lanceheads command enormous prices on the black market, with single specimens reportedly selling for $10,000 to $30,000. This has led to attempts by poachers to infiltrate the island, despite the extreme danger and strict government protection. Most such attempts end in tragedy, with would-be snake smugglers becoming victims of the very creatures they sought to capture. Local legends and folklore have grown around Ilha da Queimada Grande, many reflecting the very real dangers the island presents. Fishermen tell stories of boats that drifted too close to shore, only to have snakes swim out from the island and board their vessels. While golden lanceheads are not known to be strong swimmers, these tales reflect the deep fear that the island inspires in the local population. The most persistent legend involves the lost treasure of pirates who supposedly used the island as a hiding place for their stolen gold. According to these stories, the pirates deliberately introduced venomous snakes to the island to protect their treasure, not knowing that the serpents would evolve into something far deadlier than they intended. While historically implausible, this legend captures the island's transformation from a tropical paradise into a natural fortress, defended by evolution's most lethal guardians. Modern satellite imagery reveals the island's pristine condition, untouched by human development or environmental degradation. The forest canopy remains intact, the shoreline undeveloped, and the ecosystem preserved exactly as it was thousands of years ago. This pristine state exists only because the golden lanceheads make human habitation impossible, creating an unintentional nature preserve protected by natural selection's most effective security system. For marine biologists and herpetologists, Ilha da Queimada Grande represents a unique natural laboratory where evolution operates in isolation, creating species found nowhere else on Earth. The island demonstrates how geographic isolation can drive rapid evolutionary change, producing organisms with extreme adaptations in relatively short geological timeframes. The waters surrounding the island also harbor mysteries. The channels that separate Ilha da Queimada Grande from the mainland create unique oceanographic conditions that may influence marine life in unexpected ways. Some researchers speculate that chemical compounds from the island's ecosystem, including venom from dead snakes and their prey, might be leaching into the surrounding waters, potentially affecting marine organisms in ways not yet understood. As we contemplate this island of death floating in the South Atlantic, we're reminded that evolution operates according to its own logic, creating both beauty and terror with equal indifference. The golden lanceheads of Ilha da Queimada Grande represent nature's response to isolation and scarcity, an example of how life adapts to extreme circumstances by becoming more extreme itself. The island stands as a monument to the ocean's power to create and isolate, to preserve and transform. In its waters, we see how geographical barriers can become evolutionary laboratories, producing creatures so specialized and deadly that they transform paradise into purgatory. Ilha da Queimada Grande serves as a stark reminder that the ocean's greatest mysteries aren't always hidden in its depths. Sometimes, they lie in plain sight on tropical islands, where evolution has conducted experiments too dangerous for human observation. The golden lanceheads continue their ancient dance of survival on their isolated stage, unaware that they have become both predator and prisoner of their own deadly perfection. For those who study the ocean's mysteries from safe distances, Snake Island represents the ultimate forbidden frontier, a place where scientific curiosity must yield to the reality that some knowledge comes at too high a price. In the warm waters off Brazil's coast, evolution has created a living weapon too dangerous to touch, too valuable to ignore, and too deadly to forget. Story 5. The Rockall Shipwreck Enigma, Lone Sentinel of the North Atlantic. From the serpent-infested waters off Brazil, we now venture into the cold gray expanse of the North Atlantic, where a solitary pinnacle of rock rises from the depths, like a maritime gravestone. Rockall, a tiny granite islet measuring just 70 feet long and 30 feet wide, stands alone in one of the world's most treacherous stretches of ocean, 300 miles west of Scotland and 230 miles northwest of Ireland. This seemingly insignificant speck of land has become the center of one of maritime history's most perplexing mysteries: the unexplained disappearance of vessels that venture too close to its fog-shrouded waters. For centuries, Rockall has served as both landmark and death trap for vessels navigating the North Atlantic shipping lanes. Rising 70 feet above the waves at its highest point, the islet appears on clear days as a dark sentinel against the horizon, warning mariners of the treacherous waters that surround it. Yet when fog descends, as it frequently does in these latitudes, Rockall vanishes into a gray void that has swallowed ships and crews without leaving so much as a distress signal. The first recorded reference to Rockall appears in 16th century Irish annals, which describe it as that rock alone in the sea and warn sailors to avoid the area during storms. These early warnings proved prophetic, as the waters around Rockall would claim vessels with a consistency that defied statistical probability. Unlike other maritime hazards that announce themselves through visible reefs or predictable weather patterns, the dangers around Rockall seem to manifest from the ocean itself. The islet's geological composition adds to its mystique. Composed of a rare form of granite containing high concentrations of rebecite, a blue-black mineral that gives the rock its distinctive dark appearance, Rockall represents the exposed tip of an ancient volcanic system that once dominated this region of the Atlantic. Beneath the waves, the Rockall Plateau extends for hundreds of miles, creating a complex underwater landscape of ridges, valleys, and seamounts that can trap currents and generate unpredictable wave patterns. What makes the Rockall mystery particularly compelling is the pattern of disappearances that began to emerge during the Age of Sail. Ships would report sighting the islet and adjusting course accordingly, only to vanish without further communication. Search vessels would find no trace of wreckage, despite calm weather and good visibility in the area. The ocean around Rockall seemed to possess an appetite for ships that extended far beyond what could be explained by ordinary navigational hazards. The most famous disappearance associated with Rockall occurred in 1686, when the merchant vessel Constant Warwick reported sighting the islet during a voyage from Dublin to the Caribbean. The ship's final message, received by another vessel in the area, indicated they were adjusting course to avoid the rock. Neither the ship nor its crew of 47 was ever seen again, despite an extensive search that covered thousands of square miles of ocean. More disturbing were the partial discoveries that occasionally washed ashore on Irish and Scottish coasts. Pieces of ships bearing unfamiliar markings would appear on beaches hundreds of miles from Rockall, often months or years after vessels had gone missing in the area. These fragments showed signs of damage that couldn't be explained by normal collision with the rock itself. Timbers appeared to have been crushed by enormous pressure, while metal fittings were twisted in ways that suggested forces far beyond what waves or rocks could generate. The advent of steam navigation in the 19th century failed to reduce the mysterious losses around Rockall. If anything, the frequency of disappearances increased as more vessels began using the Great Circle route that passed near the islet. The steam packet Hibernia vanished in 1875 while carrying mail and passengers between Ireland and America. Wireless stations received the ship's routine position report, indicating they were passing Rockall, but no subsequent communication was ever received. Naval investigators of the period proposed various theories to explain the disappearances. Some suggested that underwater reefs or volcanic activity around Rockall created hidden hazards that could sink ships without warning. Others pointed to the area's notorious weather patterns, where sudden storms could overwhelm vessels before they could send distress signals. Yet none of these explanations could account for the complete absence of debris or survivors from so many well-documented losses. The mystery deepened during World War II, when military vessels began reporting unusual phenomena around Rockall. Submarine commanders described sonar contacts that appeared to be massive underwater objects moving at depths that should have been impossible for any known sea life. Surface ships reported sudden equipment failures when passing near the islet, with compass anomalies and radio interference that couldn't be attributed to enemy action or atmospheric conditions. One particularly disturbing incident involved the destroyer HMS Versatile in 1943. While conducting anti-submarine patrols near Rockall, the ship's crew reported seeing lights beneath the water that appeared to be artificial in origin. When the captain ordered depth charges dropped to investigate, the lights immediately disappeared. But sonar operators reported echoes that suggested something of enormous size moving away at high speed. No enemy submarines were known to be operating in the area, and the incident was classified as unexplained. Modern oceanographic research has revealed that the waters around Rockall are indeed more complex and dangerous than early navigators could have imagined. The Rockall Trough, a deep-sea channel that extends northward from the islet, creates conditions that can generate sudden, massive waves known as freak or rogue waves. These oceanic anomalies can reach heights of over 100 feet and appear with no warning, capable of overwhelming even large vessels. The interaction between the Gulf Stream and cold Arctic waters in this region also creates temperature differentials that can produce dense fog banks with surprising speed. Ships caught in these rapidly forming fog walls can become disoriented and lose their position within minutes, potentially running aground on underwater obstacles that don't appear on standard charts. Yet these natural explanations, while accounting for some losses, cannot explain all the peculiarities associated with Rockall disappearances. The complete absence of debris from so many incidents suggests either that ships are sinking in extraordinarily deep water, or that some factor is preventing wreckage from reaching the surface. The Rockall Trough does indeed reach depths of over 9,000 feet, but prevailing currents should still carry some floating debris toward shore. Recent deep-sea surveys using advanced sonar and underwater vehicles have mapped the seafloor around Rockall in unprecedented detail, revealing a landscape even more complex than previously imagined. Underwater canyons, volcanic vents, and extensive cave systems honeycomb the ocean floor, creating countless places where wreckage could become trapped or concealed. Some of these formations show signs of recent geological activity, suggesting that the seafloor around Rockall is still changing. Perhaps most intriguingly, these surveys have discovered several large metallic objects on the seafloor that don't match any known geological formations. While some may be explained as shipwrecks from documented losses, others show characteristics that defy easy classification. The extreme depth and challenging conditions around Rockall make detailed investigation of these objects nearly impossible with current technology. The islet's strategic importance has led to various territorial claims over the centuries, with Britain, Ireland, Iceland, and Denmark all asserting rights to Rockall at different times. In 1955, Britain formally annexed the islet and briefly established a weather station, but the installation was abandoned after equipment repeatedly failed in ways that couldn't be attributed to weather or isolation. Personnel stationed on Rockall reported persistent equipment malfunctions, unusual radio interference, and an unsettling feeling of being watched from the surrounding ocean. The territorial disputes around Rockall have practical implications beyond national pride. The waters surrounding the islet potentially contain significant oil and gas reserves, while the fishing grounds have historically been among the most productive in the North Atlantic. Yet these economic incentives are tempered by the area's reputation for swallowing vessels that venture too close to its secrets. Modern shipping generally avoids the immediate vicinity of Rockall, using satellite navigation to plot courses that give the islet a wide berth. However, fishing vessels and research ships still occasionally work in the area, and strange incidents continue to be reported. In 2003, a marine research vessel experienced complete electronics failure while conducting surveys near Rockall, forcing the crew to navigate by traditional methods until they moved away from the islet. The advent of satellite surveillance and global positioning system, also known as GPS, tracking has made it virtually impossible for large vessels to disappear completely in modern times. Yet Rockall's reputation for mysterious losses persists. Small fishing boats and pleasure craft that venture into the area sometimes experience equipment failures or report unusual sightings that echo the historical accounts of strange phenomena around the islet. For marine archaeologists and historians, Rockall represents one of the last great unsolved maritime mysteries. The combination of documented disappearances, physical evidence of unexplained forces, and the continuing reports of unusual phenomena creates a puzzle that defies conventional explanation. Whether the answer lies in undiscovered oceanographic processes, hidden geological hazards, or something beyond current scientific understanding, Rockall continues to guard its secrets jealously. As we contemplate this lonely pinnacle rising from the North Atlantic's gray waters, we're reminded that the ocean still harbors places where the normal rules of navigation and survival seem suspended. Rockall stands as a testament to the sea's capacity for mystery, a granite monument to all the ships and sailors who approached its waters seeking passage and found instead a rendezvous with the unknown. In the satellite age, when every square mile of ocean can be monitored from space and vessels tracked in real time, Rockall's legacy serves as a humbling reminder that some mysteries transcend technology. The islet continues its solitary vigil, surrounded by waters that have claimed more than their share of victims, waiting for the next vessel brave or foolish enough to test the secrets that lie hidden beneath its fog-shrouded surface. Story 6. The 200-year-old Gulf of Mexico Shipwreck, a copper-clad enigma. From the lonely waters surrounding Rockall, we now descend into the warm depths of the Gulf of Mexico, where in 2019, researchers made a discovery that challenged everything they thought they knew about 19th century maritime history. At a depth of nearly 4,000 feet, lying perfectly preserved on the abyssal plain, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration scientists, also known as NOAA, encountered a shipwreck so well preserved and technologically advanced for its time that it sparked immediate controversy about its origins, its purpose, and the mysterious circumstances that brought it to rest in one of the ocean's most remote graveyards. The discovery occurred during a routine deep-sea survey mission using the remotely operated vehicle Deep Discoverer. As the remotely operated vehicle's cameras swept across the muddy seafloor, 185 miles southeast of New Orleans, operators noticed an unusual geometric shape emerging from the sediment. What they initially assumed might be a geological formation quickly revealed itself to be something far more intriguing: the remarkably intact hull of a sailing vessel, its copper sheathing gleaming in the submersible's lights, like a metallic ghost from another era. The vessel's state of preservation was immediately striking. Unlike most shipwrecks found at such depths, which typically deteriorate rapidly in the corrosive deep-sea environment, this ship appeared almost frozen in time. The copper sheathing that covered its hull remained largely intact, protecting the underlying wood from the shipworms and bacteria that normally reduce sunken vessels to scattered timbers within decades. The preservation was so complete that individual copper sheets could be distinguished, their overlapping patterns clearly visible, even after 2 centuries on the seafloor. Initial analysis suggested the wreck dated to the early 19th century, based on its construction techniques and the style of copper sheathing. This copper bottom technology was a cutting-edge innovation of its time, expensive and typically reserved for naval vessels or the most valuable merchant ships. The practice involved covering a ship's hull with thin copper sheets to prevent fouling by marine organisms and to protect against shipworms, dramatically extending a vessel's operational life and speed. What made this discovery truly puzzling was the location. The wreck lay in an area of the Gulf of Mexico that was largely unexplored and uncharted during the early 1800s. No known shipping routes passed through this region, and no historical records documented any vessel losses in the area. The ship appeared to have been sailing through waters that, according to conventional maritime history, should have been unknown to navigators of that era. The vessel's design added another layer to the mystery. Detailed photographic analysis revealed construction features that seemed unusually advanced for the early 19th century. The hull showed evidence of sophisticated engineering, with reinforcement patterns and structural elements that wouldn't become standard until decades later. The copper sheathing itself was applied using techniques that appeared more refined than those typically employed during the supposed period of the ship's construction. Even more perplexing was the complete absence of any identifying features. Most ships of this era carried numerous markers of their identity: carved figureheads, manufacturer's plates, registry numbers, or distinctive architectural details that could link them to specific shipyards or nations. This vessel appeared to have been deliberately stripped of such identifiers, as if someone had gone to great lengths to ensure its anonymity. The wreck's cargo holds, partially visible through breaks in the deck planking, appeared to contain mysterious cylindrical objects arranged in precise rows. These items, approximately 6 feet in length and heavily corroded, defied immediate identification. They were too uniform to be typical trade goods, yet too numerous to be scientific instruments. The regular spacing and careful arrangement suggested valuable or dangerous cargo that required special handling. Efforts to determine the vessel's country of origin through construction techniques proved frustratingly inconclusive. The shipbuilding methods showed influences from multiple maritime traditions: British, French, Spanish, and even Dutch techniques appeared to have been combined in ways that didn't match any known national shipbuilding practices of the era. It was as if the vessel had been constructed by builders familiar with the best practices from multiple countries, yet belonging fully to none. The oceanographic conditions at the wreck site contributed to the mystery. The deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico are characterized by slow-moving currents and low oxygen levels that can preserve organic materials for extraordinary periods. However, the specific location of the wreck, in a depression on the seafloor surrounded by higher terrain, created an almost perfect preservation environment. The ship had settled into what marine archaeologists call a time capsule, where normal decay processes were virtually halted. Analysis of sediment cores taken around the wreck revealed disturbing anomalies. The layers of mud and organic material that should have accumulated gradually over 2 centuries showed unusual chemical signatures suggesting rapid deposition events. Some layers contained materials that appeared to be of artificial origin, including traces of metals and compounds that shouldn't have been present in early 19th century maritime contexts. Perhaps most unsettling was the complete absence of human remains anywhere on or around the wreck. Ships of this era typically carried crews of dozens of men, yet not a single bone, piece of clothing, or personal artifact has been recovered from the site. The vessel appeared to have been abandoned before it sank, yet there was no evidence of lifeboats or emergency equipment being deployed. The mystery deepened when researchers attempted to determine how the ship had sunk. The hull showed no evidence of collision damage, cannon fire, or explosive forces that might have caused rapid flooding. Instead, the vessel appeared to have settled to the bottom almost gently, as if it had simply filled with water and descended intact to the seafloor. This pattern suggested either catastrophic structural failure or deliberate scuttling. Attempts to recover artifacts from the wreck have been hampered by the extreme depth and the vessel's protected status under maritime archaeology laws. However, high-resolution sonar mapping has revealed additional mysteries. The wreck site appears to be part of a larger debris field that extends for several hundred yards in all directions. This debris includes objects that don't match the ship's apparent age or origin, suggesting either multiple wrecking events or cargo that was deliberately jettisoned. One of the most intriguing discoveries was a series of regular depressions in the seafloor surrounding the main wreck. These circular indentations, approximately 20 feet in diameter and arranged in a geometric pattern, appear to be too uniform to be natural formations. Some researchers have speculated they might represent anchor points for equipment used during the ship's final operations, while others suggest they could be impact craters from heavy objects thrown overboard. The Gulf of Mexico in the early 19th century was a region of intense maritime activity, with ships from multiple nations competing for trade routes and territorial advantages. Spanish treasure fleets, American merchants, British naval vessels, and French privateers all operated in these waters. Yet none of the historical records from any of these maritime powers contains references to a vessel matching the description of the copper-clad wreck. Recent analysis using advanced materials science techniques has revealed additional puzzles. The copper sheathing shows signs of manufacturing processes that appear more advanced than those available in the early 1800s. The metal contains trace elements and alloy compositions that suggest smelting techniques not developed until later in the 19th century. This anachronistic evidence has led some researchers to question whether the wreck is actually as old as initially believed. The preservation of organic materials within the wreck has allowed for unprecedented analysis of 19th century maritime technology. Wood samples from the hull show evidence of treatment with preservatives that weren't widely used until decades after the ship's supposed construction date. Rope fragments display weaving patterns that don't match any known maritime cordage of the period. Perhaps most mysteriously, the wreck appears to be slowly disappearing. Recent survey missions have found that portions of the vessel that were clearly visible in 2019 are now partially or completely buried under fresh sediment. The rate of burial is far faster than would be expected from normal sedimentation processes, suggesting that some factor is actively covering the wreck. Environmental monitoring around the site has detected unusual chemical signatures in the water column above the wreck. These readings include elevated levels of compounds that shouldn't be present in deep Gulf waters, suggesting that the ship or its cargo may be slowly releasing materials into the surrounding environment. The implications of this potential contamination have added urgency to research efforts, while raising new questions about the vessel's original purpose. The copper-clad enigma of the Gulf of Mexico represents more than just another shipwreck mystery. It challenges our understanding of 19th century maritime technology, questions established historical timelines, and suggests that the deep ocean may harbor secrets about our past that don't align with conventional historical narratives. As researchers continue to study this mysterious vessel, each new discovery seems to raise more questions than it answers. The ship's advanced construction, its impossible location, its missing crew, and its anachronistic materials combine to create a puzzle that defies easy explanation. In the deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico, the past and present seem to collide in ways that challenge our understanding of both maritime history and the ocean's capacity to preserve its secrets. The copper-clad wreck serves as a reminder that the ocean floor contains libraries of human history that we're only beginning to read. Each expedition to the deep reveals artifacts and evidence that force us to reconsider what we thought we knew about our past. In the case of this mysterious vessel, the ocean has preserved not just a ship, but a riddle wrapped in copper and buried in time. Story 7. The Lion's Mane Jellyfish Swarms, Arctic Angels of Death. From the mysterious depths of the Gulf of Mexico, we now rise to the frigid surface waters of the North Atlantic, where one of the ocean's most beautiful and deadly creatures drifts through the currents, like a living nightmare. The lion's mane jellyfish, Cyanea capiata, represents nature's mastery of contradictions. A creature of ethereal beauty, whose gossamer tentacles can stretch longer than a blue whale, yet whose touch brings agonizing death to anything unfortunate enough to encounter its venomous embrace. Individual lion's mane jellyfish are formidable enough, with bell diameters that can exceed 8 feet and tentacles extending over 100 feet in massive specimens. But when these giants gather in swarms, as they do with increasing frequency in the cold waters of the North Atlantic, they transform from solitary hunters into oceanic armies, capable of turning vast stretches of sea into liquid minefields, where even the most experienced mariners fear to venture. The largest confirmed lion's mane jellyfish on record was discovered in 1865 off the coast of Massachusetts. Its bell measured 2 feet 6 inches in diameter, with tentacles extending an astounding 120 feet. This single specimen possessed enough nematocysts, venomous stinging cells, to kill dozens of humans, and could have easily entangled and destroyed a small sailing vessel. Yet such giants are merely the advanced scouts of swarms that can contain thousands of individuals, creating floating forests of death that stretch beyond the horizon. These massive aggregations occur unpredictably, following patterns that marine biologists struggle to understand. Unlike other jellyfish species that swarm in response to well-documented environmental triggers, lion's mane congregations appear to follow rules that remain largely mysterious. They can materialize seemingly overnight in areas where none were present days before, or vanish just as suddenly, leaving behind only scattered fragments and the chemical signatures of their passage. The phenomenon first gained scientific attention in the early 20th century, when steamship captains began reporting encounters with what they described as jellyfish seas, areas where the water appeared thick with translucent pulsing masses that could extend for miles in every direction. These early accounts, often dismissed as exaggerations, described ships becoming entangled in tentacle masses so dense that propellers were fouled and cooling systems clogged with gelatinous debris. The HMS Britannic's encounter with a lion's mane swarm in 1907 provided one of the first well-documented accounts of the phenomenon's deadly potential. The passenger liner was crossing the North Atlantic when it entered what the captain's log described as a sea of living glass. The ship's progress slowed dramatically as its hull became fouled with jellyfish, while passengers on deck reported excruciating pain from contact with tentacle fragments carried by the wind. Most disturbing was the fate of crew members assigned to clear the ship's intake valves. 3 sailors who entered the water wearing diving suits suffered fatal stings when tentacle fragments penetrated their equipment. The venom's effect was swift and horrific: massive tissue necrosis, cardiovascular collapse, and death within hours, despite immediate medical attention. The incident forced maritime authorities to acknowledge that lion's mane swarms represented a genuine threat to shipping, not merely an inconvenience. The jellyfish's venom represents one of nature's most sophisticated biological weapons. Each tentacle contains millions of nematocysts, microscopic harpoons that fire when triggered by contact. The venom itself is a complex cocktail of toxins that attack multiple body systems simultaneously. Cardiotoxins that disrupt heart rhythm, neurotoxins that cause paralysis, and necrotizing agents that destroy tissue at the cellular level. What makes lion's mane venom particularly dangerous is its cumulative effect. While a brief contact with a few tentacles might cause only painful welts, extended exposure or contact with multiple jellyfish can deliver doses sufficient to kill large marine mammals. Whales have been found dead with characteristic circular scarring that suggests fatal encounters with lion's mane swarms, while seabirds caught in jellyfish aggregations often wash ashore in massive die-offs. The formation of lion's mane swarms appears to be linked to complex oceanographic conditions that scientists are still working to understand. These jellyfish prefer cold, nutrient-rich waters where temperatures remain below 68 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. They follow the margins of major current systems, particularly areas where warm and cold waters meet, creating the thermal boundaries that concentrate their preferred prey: small fish, zooplankton, and other jellyfish. Climate change has begun to alter the distribution and behavior of lion's mane populations in ways that increase the frequency and size of swarms. As Arctic ice melts and ocean temperatures shift, traditional thermal boundaries are changing, forcing jellyfish populations to adapt their migration patterns. Some researchers believe this environmental pressure is driving the formation of larger, more persistent swarms as individuals congregate in increasingly limited areas of suitable habitat. The swarm's unpredictability makes them particularly dangerous to modern shipping and marine activities. Unlike storms or other oceanic hazards that can be predicted and avoided, lion's mane aggregations appear with little warning and can persist for weeks or months before dispersing. Satellite imagery can sometimes detect large swarms, but smaller concentrations often go unnoticed until vessels encounter them directly. Fishing operations face particular risks from lion's mane swarms. Commercial fishing nets dragged through jellyfish concentrations become hopelessly fouled, often requiring the entire catch to be discarded due to venom contamination. More dangerous are the encounters faced by fishermen working with smaller vessels, where tentacle masses can overwhelm safety equipment and put crews in direct contact with lethal toxins. The North Sea fishing fleet has reported increasingly frequent encounters with lion's mane swarms, particularly during summer months when the jellyfish move into shallower waters to spawn. In 2010, a concentrated swarm near the Shetland Islands forced the closure of several fishing areas after multiple vessels reported crew injuries and equipment damage. The economic impact extended beyond fishing, as offshore oil platforms in the area had to modify their operations to prevent cooling system failures caused by jellyfish ingestion. Research vessels studying lion's mane behavior have developed specialized protocols for working in swarm areas, but even these precautions sometimes prove inadequate. In 2015, a marine biology expedition in the Barents Sea encountered a swarm so dense that their research vessel's hull became completely covered with jellyfish, some estimated to have tentacles exceeding 80 feet in length. The expedition was forced to retreat after several crew members suffered severe stings, despite wearing protective suits. The ecological impact of lion's mane swarms extends far beyond their direct predatory effects. These massive aggregations can temporarily alter entire marine ecosystems, consuming vast quantities of zooplankton and small fish that form the base of oceanic food webs. Areas affected by large swarms often experience cascading effects that persist long after the jellyfish have moved on, with fish populations taking months or years to recover. Perhaps most mysteriously, lion's mane swarms sometimes exhibit behaviors that suggest a level of coordination impossible for individual jellyfish. Observers have reported swarms that move in apparent unison, changing direction simultaneously across distances of several miles. This collective behavior implies communication mechanisms that scientists don't understand, possibly involving chemical signals or hydrodynamic cues that allow thousands of individual jellyfish to act as a single, massive organism. The phenomenon becomes even more unsettling when considering the jellyfish's reproductive strategy. Lion's mane jellyfish can reproduce both sexually and asexually, allowing populations to explode rapidly under favorable conditions. A single large female can release millions of eggs, while the species' ability to clone itself through budding means that successful individuals can create vast colonies of genetically identical offspring. These reproductive capabilities, combined with the species' long lifespan of up to 3 years in Arctic waters, create the potential for swarms of unprecedented size and persistence. Computer models suggest that under optimal conditions, a single founding population could theoretically expand to cover thousands of square miles within a single breeding season. The bioluminescent displays produced by large lion's mane swarms have become legendary among mariners, though few are privileged to witness them and survive unharmed. When disturbed, the jellyfish produce flashes of blue-green light that can illuminate the sea for miles around. Sailors describe these displays as both beautiful and terrifying, like sailing through a galaxy of deadly stars that pulse with malevolent life. Modern technology has begun to provide new insights into lion's mane behavior, but also new reasons for concern. Underwater drones, equipped with specialized cameras, have documented swarm formations in unprecedented detail, revealing that the largest aggregations contain not just thousands, but potentially millions of individual jellyfish. These vast assemblages create living barriers that can stretch across entire shipping lanes, forcing vessels to detour hundreds of miles to avoid contact. The warming of Arctic waters due to climate change may be creating conditions that favor even larger swarms. As traditional prey species shift their distributions northward, lions' main populations are following, concentrating in areas where ice-free water is increasing in extent and duration. This expansion into previously frozen regions creates opportunities for population growth that could result in swarms larger than any previously recorded. For marine rescue operations, lions' main swarms represent nightmarish scenarios where traditional safety protocols become ineffective. Rescue swimmers cannot safely enter water contaminated with jellyfish, while lifeboats and survival rafts offer little protection against tentacles that can extend far beneath the surface. Several tragic incidents have involved aircraft crashes or ship disasters in swarm areas where rescue operations were impossible due to the toxic environment. The lion's mane jellyfish reminds us that the ocean's most beautiful creatures are often its most dangerous. In the cold waters of the North Atlantic, these ethereal giants continue their ancient migrations, gathering in swarms that transform peaceful seas into landscapes of liquid death. As their numbers grow and their range expands, they serve as a reminder that the ocean's capacity for creating beauty and terror often exists within the same translucent, pulsing form. Their presence in our warming oceans represents both a natural wonder and a growing threat, a glimpse into an ancient world where gelatinous giants ruled the seas. As we continue to alter the ocean's chemistry and temperature, we may find ourselves sharing the waters with swarms of jellies whose size and lethality exceed anything in the historical record, floating forests of venom that turn the sea itself into our enemy. Story 8. Koh Tao Death Island Mystery, Paradise with a Deadly Secret. From the frigid waters where lion's mane jellyfish swarms drift like living nightmares, we now travel to the warm, azure waters of the Gulf of Thailand, where a tropical paradise has earned a reputation that strikes fear into the hearts of experienced travelers. Koh Tao, whose name means Turtle Island in Thai, appears on tourism brochures as an idyllic diving destination with crystal-clear waters, pristine coral reefs, and white sandy beaches. Yet beneath this picture-perfect facade lies a darker reality that has earned the island an ominous nickname, Death Island. Since the early 2000s, Koh Tao has become associated with an alarming number of unexplained deaths, mysterious disappearances, and fatal accidents involving foreign tourists. What began as isolated incidents has evolved into a pattern so consistent and disturbing that international media, insurance companies, and foreign governments have begun issuing warnings about travel to this seemingly pristine destination. The island's transformation from unknown fishing community to international diving hub occurred rapidly in the 1990s as word spread about its exceptional underwater visibility and abundant marine life. The warm waters surrounding Koh Tao offered perfect conditions for learning to dive, with gentle currents, shallow reefs, and a remarkable diversity of tropical fish. Dive schools proliferated along the island's shores, attracting thousands of young backpackers seeking adventure in one of Southeast Asia's most beautiful underwater environments. Yet it was precisely this attraction to the underwater world that first brought the island's deadly reputation to international attention. Diving accidents, while not uncommon in tropical destinations, began occurring with unusual frequency around Koh Tao. Experienced divers reported equipment failures that couldn't be explained by normal wear or user error. More disturbing were the incidents involving divers who simply vanished during routine dives, their bodies never recovered despite extensive search efforts. The first widely publicized case occurred in 2004 when a certified dive instructor from Belgium disappeared during a solo dive on the island's eastern coast. Despite perfect weather conditions, and the fact that she was diving in familiar waters she had explored dozens of times before, she simply failed to surface. An extensive search involving local dive shops, Thai naval units, and international volunteers found no trace of her equipment or remains. This incident established a pattern that would repeat with troubling regularity. Experienced individuals engaging in routine activities would simply vanish without explanation. The island's complex underwater topography, while beautiful, began to reveal darker characteristics that made search and recovery operations extremely challenging. Koh Tao sits atop an underwater mountain that rises sharply from depths, exceeding 200 feet, to shallow coral gardens just below the surface. This dramatic relief creates underwater cliff faces, caves, and crevices that can trap divers or conceal bodies indefinitely. Strong thermoclines between water layers can create sudden changes in buoyancy that disorient even experienced divers, while unpredictable currents flowing around the island's irregular coastline can sweep away anything or anyone caught in their grip. The island's diving sites, with names like Chumpfon Pinnacle and Southwest Pinnacle, are essentially underwater mountains surrounded by deep blue water. While these sites offer spectacular diving when conditions are favorable, they can become death traps when weather patterns shift. Sudden changes in current direction or strength can pin divers against rock walls or drag them into open ocean where rescue becomes impossible. However, diving accidents represent only part of Koh Tao's deadly reputation. The island has also become associated with suspicious deaths on land, mysterious falls from cliffs, apparent suicides under questionable circumstances, and disappearances that leave no forensic evidence. Young tourists who arrive healthy and excited about their tropical adventure are found days later under circumstances that raise more questions than they answer. The case of two British backpackers murdered on a beach in 2014 brought international attention to the island's problems, but it also highlighted how difficult it can be to determine the true circumstances of deaths on Koh Tao. The investigation was marked by controversy, conflicting evidence, and questions about the thoroughness of local law enforcement efforts. While convictions were eventually obtained, many observers remained unconvinced that the full truth had been revealed. Environmental factors unique to Koh Tao may contribute to the island's dangerous reputation. The rapid development of tourism infrastructure on what was previously an isolated fishing community has created environmental stresses that affect both marine ecosystems and human safety. Inadequate sewage treatment has led to algae blooms and bacterial contamination in some coastal areas, while construction runoff has damaged coral reefs and altered underwater visibility. The island's water supply, drawn from a limited freshwater lens beneath the island, has become increasingly strained by tourism demands. During dry seasons, water shortages can lead to the use of contaminated or inadequately treated water supplies, potentially contributing to illness or accidents among visitors who are unaware of local conditions. More mysterious are the reports of unusual oceanographic phenomena around Koh Tao that don't match patterns observed at other Thai islands. Local dive guides describe sudden changes in water temperature and visibility that occur without warning, creating dangerous conditions for underwater activities. These phenomena, known locally as invisible currents, can allegedly appear during calm weather and create powerful underwater forces that can overwhelm swimmers and divers. Some researchers have speculated that Koh Tao's position relative to major ocean currents and its steep underwater topography might create unique hydrodynamic conditions. The island sits near the boundary between different water masses in the Gulf of Thailand, potentially creating zones where currents converge or diverge in unpredictable ways. These oceanographic anomalies could explain some of the mysterious disappearances and diving accidents that have plagued the island. The psychological impact of Koh Tao's reputation has created a self-reinforcing cycle that may actually increase risks for visitors. Tourists arriving with knowledge of the island's deadly reputation may engage in riskier behavior, either from bravado or from anxiety that affects their judgment. Meanwhile, local businesses, dependent on tourism revenue, may downplay risks or fail to provide adequate safety warnings to avoid frightening away customers. The concentration of inexperienced divers on Koh Tao also creates conditions that increase accident potential. Many visitors arrive with newly minted diving certifications obtained in swimming pools or controlled environments, unprepared for the challenges of tropical ocean diving. The combination of overconfidence, inadequate local knowledge, and environmental hazards creates a perfect storm for underwater accidents. Recent investigations have revealed that some diving operations on Koh Tao may not meet international safety standards. Equipment maintenance in the tropical environment can be challenging, while the rapid turnover of diving instructors and guides means that local knowledge of hazardous conditions may not be consistently communicated to clients. Economic pressure to maximize diving operations can lead to shortcuts in safety procedures or diving in marginal conditions. The island's medical facilities, while adequate for routine tourism needs, are not equipped to handle serious diving emergencies or complex trauma cases. The nearest recompression chamber for treating decompression sickness is several hours away by boat or helicopter, making rapid treatment of diving accidents impossible. This limitation means that incidents that might be survivable elsewhere can become fatal on Koh Tao. Cultural factors may also contribute to the island's problems. The rapid transformation from traditional fishing community to international tourism destination has created social tensions and economic disparities that can affect visitor safety. Language barriers, different cultural expectations regarding personal safety, and varying standards of law enforcement can all contribute to dangerous situations. The role of alcohol and drugs in Koh Tao's death toll cannot be ignored. The island's party atmosphere, combined with the availability of substances that impair judgment, creates conditions where tourists may engage in extremely risky behavior. Swimming or diving while intoxicated, exploring dangerous areas at night, or becoming involved in confrontations with locals or other tourists all increase the likelihood of fatal accidents. Modern technology has begun to shed new light on some of Koh Tao's mysteries while revealing new concerns. Global Positioning System Tracking, also known as GPS, and underwater cameras carried by divers have documented some of the unusual current patterns and visibility changes that have been reported anecdotally for years. However, these same technologies have also revealed that some diving sites around the island may be more dangerous than previously understood. The island's reputation has led to increased scrutiny from international safety organizations and foreign governments. Several countries now include specific warnings about Koh Tao in their travel advisories, while insurance companies have begun treating the destination as a higher-risk location. These measures may help protect future visitors, but they also highlight how a tropical paradise can become synonymous with danger. For marine safety experts, Koh Tao represents a case study in how multiple risk factors can combine to create an environment where accidents become statistically inevitable. The island's challenging underwater topography, variable environmental conditions, concentration of inexperienced divers, rapid tourism development, and possible oceanographic anomalies create a perfect storm for maritime disasters. As investigations continue and safety measures improve, the true nature of Koh Tao's deadly reputation may become clearer. Whether the island's problems stem from natural hazards, human factors, or some combination of both, the pattern of deaths and disappearances serves as a sobering reminder that even in paradise, the ocean demands respect and preparation from those who venture into its domain. The warm, inviting waters around Turtle Island continue to attract thousands of visitors each year, drawn by the promise of underwater adventure and tropical beauty. Yet beneath the surface, in the deep blue waters where currents converge and underwater mountains rise from the depths, Koh Tao guards its deadly secrets, waiting for the next unwary visitor to discover that paradise can quickly become purgatory for those who underestimate the ocean's hidden dangers. Story 9. The Methane Bubble Traps. Arctic Time Bombs Beneath the Ice. From the warm, deceptively dangerous waters around Koh Tao, we now venture to the opposite extreme, the frozen wastes of the Arctic Ocean, where beneath layers of ancient ice lies one of the most volatile and little understood phenomena in the marine world. Hidden within the crystalline structures of Arctic sea ice are pockets of methane gas, so concentrated and unstable that they represent floating bombs capable of asphyxiation, explosion, or both. These methane bubble traps, known locally as Sussa ice, have only recently been discovered by science, yet they may have been claiming lives in the Arctic for centuries. The discovery of these lethal ice formations occurred almost by accident in 2017, when a team of marine researchers studying climate change effects in the Laptev Sea noticed unusual formations in the sea ice. What appeared to be normal polar ice showed strange internal structures when examined with ground-penetrating radar, hollow chambers filled with gas that created cavities throughout the ice sheet. When samples were extracted and analyzed, the gas proved to be methane in concentrations high enough to create serious explosion and asphyxiation risks. The formation of methane bubble traps represents a complex interaction between Arctic oceanography, permafrost dynamics, and the unique physics of sea ice formation. As the Arctic Ocean freezes each winter, methane gas escaping from the seafloor becomes trapped within the developing ice structure. Unlike simple gas bubbles that might escape to the atmosphere, these methane concentrations become locked within ice crystals in a process that concentrates the gas far beyond its natural atmospheric levels. The source of this methane lies in the vast deposits of organic matter frozen in Arctic permafrost and seafloor sediments. As global temperatures rise and permafrost begins to thaw, enormous quantities of previously frozen organic material begin to decompose, releasing methane as a byproduct. This gas rises through the water column and, during ice formation periods, becomes incorporated into the growing ice sheet in concentrations that can exceed 50% by volume in some pockets. What makes these formations particularly dangerous is their instability. Methane hydrates formed under the extreme pressure and cold of the deep. Arctic can exist in a delicate equilibrium that minor changes in temperature or pressure can disrupt catastrophically. A sudden increase in air temperature, mechanical disturbance of the ice, or even changes in atmospheric pressure can cause rapid decomposition of the methane hydrates, releasing massive volumes of gas in seconds. Historical accounts from Arctic explorers and indigenous communities now take on new significance when viewed in light of these discoveries. Inuit traditions include numerous references to bad ice that could kill without warning, areas where hunters would suddenly collapse, or where mysterious explosions would occur in seemingly solid ice fields. These accounts, long dismissed as folklore or attributed to other causes, may actually represent centuries-old encounters with methane bubble traps. The 1845 disappearance of the Franklin expedition, one of Arctic exploration's greatest mysteries, has been re-examined in light of methane trap discoveries. The expedition's route took them through areas now known to contain extensive methane hydrate deposits in the sea ice. Some researchers have speculated that encounters with unstable methane formations could have contributed to the expedition's fate, either through direct poisoning of crew members or by creating navigation hazards that trapped the ships in dangerous ice conditions. Modern Arctic operations face increasing risks from these formations, as climate change accelerates the release of methane from thawing permafrost. Icebreakers and polar research vessels have reported sudden equipment failures and crew illnesses when operating in areas later found to contain methane bubble traps. In 2019, a Russian research vessel experienced multiple crew members collapsing on deck after breaking through ice that released massive methane plumes. Only rapid evacuation and medical treatment prevented fatalities. The concentration of methane within these ice formations can reach levels sufficient to cause rapid asphyxiation. Methane displaces oxygen in enclosed spaces, and when trapped ice melts or breaks, it can create invisible clouds of gas that are odorless and difficult to detect without specialized equipment. Workers on ice fields or researchers taking ice samples can find themselves in pockets of atmosphere containing insufficient oxygen to maintain consciousness. Even more dangerous is the explosion potential. Methane concentrations between 5% and 15% of air volume create highly explosive mixtures that can ignite from the smallest spark. Arctic operations involving any source of ignition, from vehicle engines to cooking equipment, face serious risks when operating near methane bubble traps. Several unexplained explosions in Arctic research camps may have resulted from accidental ignition of methane released from unstable ice formations. The detection of methane bubble traps requires specialized equipment that most Arctic operations don't routinely carry. Ground-penetrating radar can reveal the internal structure of ice formations, while gas detectors can identify dangerous methane concentrations in the atmosphere. However, the remote nature of most Arctic operations and the extreme environmental conditions make consistent monitoring challenging. Climate change is rapidly increasing both the extent and danger of methane bubble traps. As Arctic temperatures rise at twice the global average, permafrost thaw accelerates, releasing more organic matter for decomposition and methane production. Simultaneously, changes in sea ice formation patterns create new areas where methane can become trapped, while earlier melting periods expose previously stable formations to destabilizing conditions. The scale of methane trapped in Arctic ice formations is staggering. Conservative estimates suggest that the total volume of methane locked in polar ice could exceed the entire atmospheric content of the gas. If released rapidly, this could create local atmospheric conditions incompatible with human life across vast areas of the Arctic Ocean. More alarming is the potential for cascading releases, where the melting of one methane-rich ice formation triggers the destabilization of others in a chain reaction. Research vessels operating in the Arctic now encounter methane plumes with increasing frequency. In 2020, the Norwegian research vessel Kronprins Haakon documented methane concentrations in Arctic waters that were over 1,000 times normal background levels. The gas was bubbling from the seafloor so vigorously that sonar systems detected acoustic shadows where methane bubbles blocked sound transmission, creating dead zones in underwater monitoring equipment. The physiological effects of methane exposure add another layer of danger to Arctic operations. While methane itself is not toxic, it displaces oxygen and can cause rapid unconsciousness at concentrations above 10%. The symptoms of methane poisoning include dizziness, nausea, and loss of coordination, effects that can be fatal in the extreme cold of Arctic environments where incapacitated individuals face rapid hypothermia. Indigenous Arctic communities report increasing encounters with what they describe as singing ice, formations that emit strange sounds as trapped gases shift within the ice structure. These acoustic phenomena, barely audible to human ears, may serve as early warning signs of unstable methane formations. Traditional knowledge holders describe learning to identify dangerous ice by its sound, appearance, and even smell, skills that are becoming increasingly relevant as methane formations become more common. The environmental implications extend beyond immediate human safety. Methane bubble traps represent a previously unknown component of the Arctic carbon cycle, one that could significantly accelerate global warming. When these formations destabilize, they release methane directly to the atmosphere, bypassing the usual oceanic absorption processes that might moderate the gas's climate impact. Military operations in the Arctic face particular risks from methane bubble traps, as naval vessels and aircraft operating in polar regions may encounter dangerous gas concentrations without warning. Submarine operations are especially vulnerable, as methane plumes can create underwater dead zones where buoyancy control becomes difficult and mechanical systems malfunction due to gas contamination. The unpredictable nature of methane bubble trap formation makes them particularly insidious. Unlike other Arctic hazards that follow seasonal patterns or geographic distributions, these formations can appear anywhere that sea ice forms over methane-producing sediments. This unpredictability means that areas considered safe for decades may suddenly become dangerous, as permafrost thaw increases methane production in previously stable regions. Recent technological advances have begun to reveal the true extent of Arctic methane formations. Satellite monitoring can now detect large methane plumes from space, while underwater sensors provide real-time data on gas concentrations in polar waters. However, these monitoring systems also reveal the accelerating pace of methane release, suggesting that the window for developing effective safety protocols may be rapidly closing. The discovery of methane bubble traps has forced a fundamental reassessment of Arctic safety protocols. Operations that were once considered routine now require gas detection equipment, emergency evacuation procedures, and specialized training for recognizing dangerous ice formations. The cost and complexity of these safety measures are forcing some organizations to reconsider the viability of Arctic operations. For marine safety experts, methane bubble traps represent a new category of oceanic hazard that doesn't fit traditional risk assessment models. Unlike storms or ice conditions that can be predicted and avoided, these formations can appear rapidly and without warning, creating deadly conditions in areas previously considered safe. The development of detection and avoidance strategies for methane formations is becoming a critical area of maritime safety research. The psychological impact of methane bubble traps extends beyond their direct physical dangers. Arctic workers report increased anxiety and stress when operating in areas known to contain unstable ice formations. The knowledge that seemingly solid ice beneath their feet may contain invisible bombs of explosive gas creates a constant undercurrent of fear that affects decision-making and operational efficiency. As we confront the reality of methane bubble traps in our warming Arctic, we face a sobering reminder that climate change is not just altering the environment but creating entirely new categories of danger. These frozen time bombs, hidden beneath the ice that has protected the Arctic for millennia, represent the awakening of forces that have slept since the last ice age. The methane bubble traps of the Arctic Ocean serve as a chilling metaphor for the unintended consequences of our changing planet. In our quest to unlock the Arctic's resources and navigate its opening waters, we may be walking on thin ice in more ways than one, where each step risks triggering an explosion that has been building beneath the surface for thousands of years. Story 10. The Deep Sea. Volcanic Vents. Portals to hell beneath the waves. From the frozen methane bombs of the Arctic, we now plunge into the scalding depths of the Pacific, where in the Lau Basin between Tonga and Fiji, the ocean floor splits open to reveal one of Earth's most extreme and lethal environments. Here, thousands of feet beneath the waves, superheated water erupts from the planet's interior with such violence and toxicity that it creates underwater infernos capable of instantly destroying any life form unfortunate enough to venture too close. These are the deep-sea volcanic vents of the Lao Basin, portals to the molten heart of our planet that represent some of the most dangerous environments ever discovered by human exploration. The Lao Basin sits atop one of the most geologically active regions on Earth, where the Indo-Australian and Pacific tectonic plates meet in a violent collision that has been reshaping the ocean floor for millions of years. This ongoing tectonic battle creates a spreading center, where new oceanic crust is born in spectacular displays of volcanic fury. The result is a landscape that defies description. Towering underwater mountains, vast fields of cooling lava, and most dramatically, hydrothermal vents that spew superheated, chemically toxic water into the surrounding ocean. These vents operate as pressure release valves for the immense geological forces at work beneath the seafloor. Seawater penetrates deep into the fractured oceanic crust, where it encounters magma chambers heated to temperatures exceeding 1,200 degrees Celsius. The water becomes superheated under pressure, dissolving minerals and toxic metals from the surrounding rock, before erupting back to the seafloor at temperatures that can reach 400 degrees Celsius or higher. What emerges from these underwater geysers is not merely hot water, but a lethal cocktail of dissolved minerals, heavy metals, and toxic gases that would be instantly fatal to any conventional life form. The vent fluids contain concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, methane, and heavy metals like copper, zinc, and lead that are thousands of times higher than normal seawater levels. The very water around these vents becomes a toxic soup, capable of poisoning marine life at considerable distances from the venting source. The discovery of the Lao Basin's extreme vent systems occurred during deep-sea explorations in the 1990s, when researchers using remotely operated vehicles first encountered water temperatures and chemical compositions that pushed their equipment beyond design limits. The initial reaction was disbelief. How could water remain liquid at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius? The answer lies in the crushing pressure of the deep ocean, which raises the boiling point of water far above its surface temperature limits. The physical dangers posed by these vents extend far beyond their extreme temperatures. The violent eruption of superheated water creates powerful convection currents that can damage or destroy underwater vehicles. The dissolved minerals in the vent fluids precipitate out when they contact normal seawater, creating dense clouds of metallic particles that can clog filters, coat equipment surfaces, and create mechanical failures in submersibles and remotely operated vehicles, also known as ROVs. Perhaps most dangerous are the sudden temperature gradients created by vent activity. Water temperatures can change by hundreds of degrees within distances of just a few meters, creating thermal shock conditions that can shatter pressure-resistant materials and cause catastrophic equipment failures. Deep-sea vehicles that venture too close to active vents risk having their hull materials compromised by rapid thermal expansion and contraction. The toxic nature of vent emissions creates additional hazards for deep-sea exploration. Hydrogen sulfide concentrations around active vents can exceed levels that would be immediately fatal to humans, while heavy metal contamination poses long-term health risks to researchers handling samples or equipment exposed to vent fluids. The corrosive nature of the water can rapidly degrade even specialized deep-sea equipment, leading to unexpected failures during critical operations. The Lao Basin's vent systems are particularly dangerous because of their extreme variability and unpredictability. Unlike more stable hydrothermal systems found in other parts of the world's oceans, the vents in this region can change their output dramatically within hours or days. Temperature readings can fluctuate by hundreds of degrees, while chemical compositions shift as different mineral layers are accessed by the circulating water. This instability reflects the dynamic nature of the underlying geological system. The Lao Basin is actively spreading, meaning that new vents can appear without warning, while existing ones can shut down or relocate. Researchers have documented cases where vent fields that were actively studied suddenly became dormant, while new venting areas appeared in previously stable regions of the seafloor. The biological communities that somehow thrive around these extreme environments represent one of the most remarkable adaptations to hostile conditions ever documented. Giant tube worms, specialized bacteria, and unique crustaceans have evolved to not only survive, but flourish in conditions that would instantly kill most life forms. However, These organisms are precisely adapted to specific chemical and temperature conditions, and changes in vent activity can cause massive die-offs that litter the seafloor with toxic organic matter. The decomposition of these specialized organisms creates additional hazards for deep-sea operations. As vent communities die off due to changes in hydrothermal activity, their remains release concentrated toxins and create oxygen-depleted zones that can extend for considerable distances around vent sites. These dead zones pose risks to both equipment and the marine life that depends on the unique vent ecosystems. Recent research has revealed that the Lau Basin's vent systems may be more interconnected than previously understood. Seismic monitoring has detected underground connections between vent fields separated by dozens of miles, suggesting that changes in one area can trigger responses throughout the entire region. This interconnectedness means that what appears to be a localized hydrothermal event may actually represent the surface expression of much larger geological processes. The extreme conditions around deep-sea vents have made them natural laboratories for studying the limits of life and the conditions that might exist on other worlds. However, this research comes with significant risks that have claimed equipment worth millions of dollars and occasionally endangered human researchers. The loss of deep-sea vehicles to vent-related accidents has forced the development of new safety protocols and equipment designs specifically adapted to these extreme environments. One of the most dangerous aspects of Lau Basin vent systems is their potential for explosive activity. When superheated water under extreme pressure suddenly encounters areas of lower pressure, it can undergo explosive decompression that creates underwater shock waves, powerful enough to damage nearby equipment or geological structures. These explosions can occur without warning and can trigger cascading failures in vent systems across wide areas. The chemical byproducts of vent activity also create long-term environmental hazards that persist long after the direct thermal dangers have passed. Heavy metals and toxic compounds released by hydrothermal activity can accumulate in seafloor sediments, creating contaminated zones that remain dangerous for decades or centuries. Fish and other marine life that venture into these areas can accumulate toxic levels of metals, potentially affecting marine food chains far from the original vent sites. The study of Lau Basin vents has revealed that these systems may play a crucial role in global ocean chemistry, releasing significant quantities of minerals and gases that influence ocean composition on a planetary scale. However, this same chemical output represents a source of long-term environmental contamination that could have far-reaching consequences as deep-sea mining and other human activities increase in these regions. Modern deep-sea exploration technology continues to push the boundaries of what's possible in these extreme environments, but the vents consistently prove more dangerous and unpredictable than equipment designers anticipate. Pressure housings designed to withstand crushing depths can fail when exposed to rapid temperature changes, while chemical sensors calibrated for normal seawater conditions become unreliable or damaged when exposed to vent fluids. The discovery of new vent fields in the Lau Basin continues at a pace that suggests the full extent of hydrothermal activity in the region is still unknown. Each new discovery reveals conditions more extreme than the last, with temperatures, chemical concentrations, and geological instability that challenge our understanding of what environments can exist on Earth. For marine researchers, the deep-sea vents of the Lau Basin represent both the ultimate frontier and the ultimate danger zone. These underwater cauldrons offer unparalleled insights into planetary processes, the origins of life, and the conditions that might exist elsewhere in the universe. Yet they exact a price in equipment, risk, and human life that makes each venture into their domain a calculated gamble with forces beyond human control. As we continue to explore these alien landscapes hidden beneath the waves, the volcanic vents serve as humbling reminders of the planet's raw power. In the crushing depths of the Lau Basin, where superheated toxic water erupts from cracks in the Earth's crust, we encounter conditions so extreme that they challenge not just our technology, but our very conception of what environments can exist on our planet. These portals to the Earth's molten interior continue their ancient work of creating and destroying, indifferent to human presence or ambition. They remind us that beneath the familiar surface of our oceans lies a world of fire and poison, where the planet's most fundamental forces operate according to rules that make human survival not just unlikely, but impossible. Story 11. The Golden Sphere of Alaska, an alien enigma from the abyss. From the hellish volcanic vents of the Lau Basin, We now venture into the frigid depths of the Gulf of Alaska, where in 2023, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, researchers made a discovery that has baffled marine biologists, microbiologists, and physicists alike. At a depth of 3,300 meters, on a remote seamount where sunlight has never penetrated, their deep-sea cameras captured an image that defies classification. A perfectly spherical, golden object that appeared to glow with its own inner light, sitting alone on the abyssal seafloor like a beacon from another world. The discovery occurred during a routine deep-sea mapping expedition using the remotely operated vehicle Deep Discoverer. As the ROV's cameras swept across the muddy seafloor of an unnamed seamount, operators noticed an unusual reflection in the vehicle's lights. What emerged from the darkness was unlike anything in the extensive catalog of deep-sea organisms and geological formations. A smooth, metallic sphere approximately 10 centimeters in diameter, with a surface that appeared to shimmer and pulse with golden luminescence. The object's appearance was so unexpected and alien that initial reports questioned whether it might be man-made debris, perhaps a lost scientific instrument or component from a research vessel. However, detailed examination revealed characteristics that ruled out human origin. The sphere's surface showed no signs of manufactured joints, seams, or markings that would indicate artificial construction. Instead, it appeared to be a single, seamless structure with an almost organic quality to its golden exterior. More disturbing was the object's apparent behavior. Unlike the static rocks and sediments that typically populate the deep sea floor, the golden sphere seemed to respond to the ROV's presence. Video footage showed the object's luminescence intensifying when the vehicle's lights approached, while subtle movements suggested it might be capable of autonomous motion. The sphere appeared to pulse in rhythmic patterns that some observers described as almost respiratory in nature. The decision to attempt recovery of the object sparked immediate controversy within the scientific community. While the sphere represented an unprecedented discovery that could revolutionize understanding of deep-sea life, the potential risks of bringing an unknown organism to the surface raised serious biosafety concerns. Initial attempts to sample the object using the ROV's mechanical arms were unsuccessful, as the sphere appeared to have a consistency that was neither solid nor liquid, but something between the two states. When physical contact was finally achieved, the results were even more puzzling. The sphere yielded slightly to pressure, suggesting a soft or gelatinous interior, yet maintained its perfect spherical shape when the pressure was released. Most unsettling was the object's response to contact. The golden luminescence spread outward from the point of touch, creating wave-like patterns across the sphere's surface that lasted for several minutes after the ROV had moved away. Attempts to determine the sphere's composition using the ROV's limited analytical capabilities provided confusing results. Spectroscopic analysis suggested the presence of organic compounds, unlike any found in known marine organisms, while the object's electromagnetic signature indicated properties that didn't match any cataloged biological or geological materials. The sphere appeared to be composed of elements common to Earth, yet arranged in molecular structures that terrestrial biochemistry couldn't explain. The recovery operation, when finally attempted, revealed another unsettling characteristic. The sphere appeared to be significantly lighter than its size would suggest. Despite its apparent density and metallic appearance, the object exhibited neutral buoyancy in seawater, floating effortlessly in the water column when disturbed from the seafloor. This property, combined with its perfect spherical shape, suggested structural characteristics that defied conventional understanding of marine organisms. Transportation to surface laboratories required specialized containment protocols typically reserved for potentially dangerous microorganisms. The sphere was isolated in pressure-maintained chambers filled with sterile seawater from its recovery depth, preventing both contamination and exposure to atmospheric conditions that might alter its properties. Even with these precautions, the object's behavior during ascent raised new concerns about its true nature. As the containment chamber rose through the water column, the sphere's luminescence changed dramatically. The golden glow that had characterized its appearance at depth shifted through a spectrum of colors, from deep amber to brilliant yellow to an almost white radiance that required protective filters for direct observation. This chromatic shift appeared to correlate with decreasing pressure, suggesting that the sphere's internal processes were directly affected by environmental conditions. Initial laboratory analysis confirmed that the object was indeed biological in origin, but of a type so unusual that it challenged fundamental assumptions about life in extreme environments. The sphere appeared to be a single, enormous cell or cellular structure, yet it displayed organizational complexity that exceeded anything seen in terrestrial microbiology. Internal structures visible through advanced imaging techniques suggested specialized organelles and systems that didn't correspond to known cellular biology. Most concerning was the discovery that the sphere contained active biological processes that continued to function in laboratory conditions. Metabolic analysis revealed the consumption of dissolved organic matter and the production of unknown chemical byproducts, suggesting that the organism was not only alive, but potentially capable of growth and reproduction. The implications of harboring an unknown life form with unclear biological capabilities raised serious questions about containment protocols and safety procedures. Genetic analysis proved equally baffling. While the sphere contained DNA-like molecules, the genetic code appeared to utilize additional base pairs beyond the 4 nucleotides found in all known terrestrial life. This expanded genetic alphabet suggested either an entirely novel form of biochemistry or a life form with evolutionary origins completely separate from the tree of life known to science. The sphere's apparent ability to metabolize a wide range of organic compounds raised alarming questions about its potential ecological impact if released into Earth's biosphere. Laboratory tests revealed that the organism could process complex organic molecules with efficiency that exceeded most known microorganisms, suggesting it might be capable of rapidly colonizing new environments if given the opportunity. Perhaps most unsettling was the sphere's response to various stimuli in laboratory conditions. The object appeared to react to light, sound, and electromagnetic fields in ways that suggested not just biological responses, but possible awareness or intelligence. Patterns in its luminescence seemed to correlate with external stimuli, leading some researchers to speculate that the sphere might possess sensory capabilities and information processing systems. The discovery of similar objects in archived deep-sea footage raised disturbing questions about how long such organisms might have existed undetected in Earth's oceans. Review of decades of deep-sea exploration videos revealed occasional glimpses of golden, luminescent objects that had been dismissed as equipment reflections or unusual geological formations. The possibility that an entire population of these mysterious organisms might inhabit the deep ocean suggested that human understanding of marine biodiversity was far more incomplete than previously imagined. Attempts to culture the organism in laboratory conditions met with limited success. While the sphere continued to display biological activity in controlled environments, efforts to stimulate growth or reproduction were unsuccessful. The organism appeared to require specific environmental conditions that were difficult to replicate in terrestrial facilities, suggesting adaptation to the extreme pressure, temperature, and chemical conditions of the deep seafloor. The sphere's electromagnetic properties presented another category of mystery. The object generated weak but detectable electromagnetic fields that varied in frequency and intensity based on its activity level. These emissions didn't correspond to any known biological electromagnetic phenomena, raising questions about how the organism generated and controlled these fields and what purpose they might serve. International collaboration on studying the golden sphere revealed that similar objects had been encountered by deep-sea research programs in other parts of the world's oceans. However, most of these sightings had been treated as anomalies or equipment malfunctions, with the objects either not recovered or subsequently lost due to containment failures. The Alaska specimen represented the first successful long-term study of what might be a globally distributed but rarely observed life form. The potential implications of the golden sphere's existence extend far beyond marine biology. If the organism represents a form of life with biochemistry fundamentally different from terrestrial organisms, it could provide insights into alternative evolutionary pathways and the possible forms that life might take on other worlds. However, the same characteristics that make it scientifically valuable also make it potentially dangerous from a biosafety perspective. As research continues, the golden sphere remains one of the most enigmatic discoveries in the history of deep-sea exploration. Its alien appearance, unusual biochemistry, and apparent intelligence challenge our understanding of what forms life can take in Earth's most extreme environments. Whether it represents an ancient lineage that has survived unchanged in the deep ocean, or something more exotic, remains one of the most intriguing questions in modern marine science. The discovery serves as a humbling reminder that the deep ocean continues to harbor forms of life that challenge our most basic assumptions about biology and the limits of life on Earth. In the crushing darkness of the abyssal depths, where pressure would instantly kill any surface organism, alien forms of life may have been evolving along entirely different pathways for millions of years, waiting for human technology to finally penetrate their hidden realm and discover their existence. The golden sphere of Alaska continues to glow in its laboratory containment, a living mystery that bridges the gap between the known and unknown, the terrestrial and the alien. As scientists work to unlock its secrets, they are forced to confront the possibility that Earth's biosphere may be far stranger and more diverse than they ever imagined, harboring forms of life that exist according to biological rules we are only beginning to comprehend. Story 12. The Moray Eel's Toxic Bite, Serpents of the Coral Labyrinth. From the alien mysteries of the deep abyss, we now venture into the shallow, sun-dappled waters of tropical coral reefs, where beauty and danger intertwine in ways that have trapped the unwary for centuries. Hidden within the labyrinthine passages of coral formations lurk some of the ocean's most patient and deadly predators. Moray eels, serpentine hunters, whose bite delivers not just crushing mechanical force, but a cocktail of bacteria and toxins that can turn a minor diving accident into a life-threatening medical emergency. Unlike the dramatic attacks of sharks or the obvious danger of venomous jellyfish, Moray eels represent a more insidious threat that has claimed divers, fishermen, and marine researchers through a combination of bacterial infection, toxic compounds, and tissue necrosis that can begin within hours of a bite and progress to life-threatening complications within days. These ancient predators have perfected a hunting strategy that relies not on immediate kill, but on patient persistence and biological warfare. Moray eels inhabit the crevices and caverns of coral reefs worldwide, from the Caribbean to the Indo-Pacific, creating a network of hidden layers that honeycomb the underwater landscape. Their elongated muscular bodies, perfectly adapted for navigating tight spaces, allow them to access areas where other predators cannot follow. This advantage comes with a price. Morays must defend their territory aggressively, as abandoning a prime hunting location could mean starvation in the competitive environment of the reef. The moray's mouth represents one of nature's most efficient damage-dealing systems. Unlike most fish, which have a single set of jaws, morays possess a second set of pharyngeal jaws located deep in their throat. When a moray bites, these secondary jaws extend forward to grasp prey and drag it deeper into the eel's gullet, creating wounds that are both deep and extensively contaminated with bacteria from the eel's mouth and throat. What makes moray bites particularly dangerous is not the mechanical damage, severe though it may be, but the complex ecosystem of microorganisms that inhabit the eel's mouth. The warm, humid environment of a moray's oral cavity, combined with the constant presence of decaying organic matter from previous meals, creates ideal conditions for the growth of pathogenic bacteria. When these bacteria enter human tissue through bite wounds, they can cause rapid and severe infections that resist conventional antibiotic treatment. The bacterial load in a moray's mouth is dominated by species rarely encountered in typical wound infections. Vibrio species, normally associated with cholera and other serious diseases, thrive in the saline environment of the eel's mouth. Photobacterium damselae, a particularly aggressive pathogen, can cause necrotizing fasciitis, a flesh-eating condition that destroys muscle, fat, and skin tissue with alarming speed. Perhaps most concerning is the presence of Edwardsiella tarda, a bacterium that produces hydrogen sulfide and other toxic compounds as byproducts of its metabolism. When introduced into human tissue, this organism not only causes severe local infection, but releases toxins that can affect the nervous system, causing symptoms ranging from localized numbness to more serious neurological complications. The mechanical structure of moray teeth compounds the bacterial threat. Unlike the razor-sharp teeth of sharks, which create clean cuts that can be easily cleaned and treated, moray teeth are recurved and designed to grip rather than slice. This creates puncture wounds with ragged, irregular edges that are difficult to clean thoroughly and provide ideal conditions for bacterial growth in the deep tissue layers where immune system responses are less effective. Historical accounts from Caribbean diving operations reveal the serious nature of moray bite injuries. During the early days of commercial diving, before the dangers were fully understood, Workers clearing ship hulls and harbor installations frequently suffered moray bites that were initially dismissed as minor occupational hazards. However, these seemingly trivial wounds often developed into serious infections that could require amputation or prove fatal if left untreated. The tropical environment where most moray encounters occur exacerbates the infection risk. High ambient temperatures and humidity create ideal conditions for bacterial growth, while the limited medical facilities often available in remote diving locations mean that proper treatment may be delayed for hours or days after the initial bite. This delay allows bacterial infections to establish themselves firmly in the victim's tissues, making subsequent treatment more difficult and less effective. Recent research has revealed that moray eels may actively cultivate the toxic bacteria in their mouths as a biological weapon. Analysis of moray oral flora shows that the bacterial composition changes based on the eel's diet and environment, with eels that feed on carrion or diseased fish developing particularly virulent bacterial populations. This suggests that the toxic bite may be an evolved hunting strategy rather than an accidental byproduct of the eel's lifestyle. The neurotoxic effects of some moray bite infections have only recently been recognized and studied. Victims of severe moray bites sometimes report persistent numbness, tingling, and loss of motor function in the affected area that can persist for months or years after the initial injury has healed. These neurological symptoms appear to result from toxins produced by bacteria in the bite wound, rather than direct nerve damage from the bite itself. Modern diving medicine has developed specific protocols for treating moray bite injuries, but the effectiveness of treatment depends heavily on rapid intervention. The standard approach involves aggressive wound cleaning, broad-spectrum antibiotics, targeting marine bacteria, and close monitoring for signs of necrotizing infection. However, even with prompt medical attention, serious complications can develop, particularly in cases where the bite occurs in areas with rich blood supply or near vital structures. The behavior of moray eels makes bite incidents particularly likely during certain types of diving activities. Morays are naturally curious and may investigate divers who remain motionless near their lairs, while feeding activities or flash photography can trigger defensive responses. Most dangerous are attempts to hand-feed morays, a practice that has resulted in severe bite injuries even when conducted by experienced marine biologists. The camouflage abilities of moray eels contribute significantly to bite risk. These predators can remain virtually invisible within coral formations, their mottled skin patterns blending perfectly with the shadows and textures of the reef environment. Divers may unknowingly approach or even contact a hidden moray before realizing the eel's presence, triggering a defensive bite that occurs too quickly to avoid. Night diving presents particular risks for moray encounters, as these eels are primarily nocturnal hunters that emerge from their lairs after dark to patrol the reef. The reduced visibility and altered behavior patterns of nighttime diving increase the likelihood of accidental contact with hunting morays, while the delay in recognizing and treating bite injuries in darkness can worsen the ultimate medical outcome. The seasonal behavior of moray eels also affects bite risk, particularly during mating seasons when eels become more aggressive and territorial. During these periods, morays may venture further from their usual lairs and react more violently to perceived threats, increasing both the likelihood of encounters and the severity of resulting bites. Training programs for diving professionals now include specific modules on moray eel behavior and bite prevention, emphasizing the importance of maintaining safe distances from coral formations where eels might be hiding. However, the unpredictable nature of moray encounters means that even experienced divers can find themselves victims of these serpentine predators. The medical complexity of treating moray bite infections has led to the development of specialized treatment protocols at diving medicine centers in tropical regions. These facilities maintain stocks of antibiotics specifically effective against marine bacteria and have developed rapid diagnostic techniques for identifying the specific pathogens involved in moray bite infections. Research into moray eel biology continues to reveal new aspects of their predatory capabilities that may affect human safety. Recent discoveries of previously unknown toxic compounds in moray saliva suggest that the bacterial infection may be only part of the danger posed by these eels. The full extent of the chemical warfare capabilities evolved by these ancient predators is still being investigated. For marine enthusiasts exploring coral reefs, moray eels represent a reminder that the ocean's most beautiful environments often harbor hidden dangers. These serpentine predators, with their patient hunting style and biologically weaponized bites, have evolved to thrive in the complex ecosystem of the coral reef by becoming masters of chemical warfare. The next time you glide through a coral garden, marveling at its beauty and diversity, remember that within the shadows and crevices lurk creatures whose bite can turn a moment of inattention into a medical emergency. The moray eels of the coral labyrinth continue their ancient vigil, patient predators armed with bacterial weapons that remind us that in the ocean's most beautiful places, danger often wears the most deceptive disguises. Story 13. The 1968 Submarine Disappearances, the year the sea swallowed steel. From the bacterial weapons of moray eels in shallow tropical waters, we now descend to one of the most chilling maritime mysteries of the modern era. The year 1968 has become known in naval circles as the Year of Lost Submarines, when 4 different nations lost submarines under circumstances so mysterious and similar that they suggest forces at work beneath the waves, that challenge our understanding of underwater warfare, mechanical failure, and the ocean's capacity to claim even the most advanced vessels without leaving traces. Within a span of just 5 months, submarines from 4 different navies vanished in waters around the world. The Israeli submarine Dakar in the Mediterranean, the French submarine Minerve in the same sea just weeks later, the Soviet ballistic missile submarine K-129 in the North Pacific, and the American nuclear submarine USS Scorpion in the Atlantic. Each represented the pinnacle of their nation's submarine technology, crewed by experienced officers and maintained according to the highest military standards. Yet all 4 disappeared without distress signals, without survivors, and initially without explanation. The French submarine Minerve was the first to vanish, disappearing on January 27, 1968, while returning to port in Toulon after a training exercise. The diesel-electric submarine, carrying 52 crew members, was last heard from at 7:55 a.m. as it approached the French coast in calm weather conditions. Radio contact simply ceased, as if the submarine had been instantaneously removed from existence. Despite an immediate and extensive search involving French, British, and American naval forces, no trace of the Minerve was found for over 50 years. The French submarine Minerve was the first to vanish, disappearing on January 27, 1968, while returning to port in Toulon after a training exercise. The diesel-electric submarine, carrying 52 crew members, was last heard from at 7:55 a.m. as it approached the French coast in calm weather conditions. Radio contact simply ceased, as if the submarine had been instantaneously removed from existence. Despite an immediate and extensive search involving French, British, and American naval forces, no trace of the Minerve was found for over 50 years. The submarine's final transmission was routine, reporting position, and requesting permission to surface in preparation for harbor approach. Weather conditions were excellent, with calm seas and good visibility. The Minerve was operating in familiar waters that the crew had navigated countless times before. There was no indication of mechanical problems, enemy action, or any other factor that might explain the sudden loss of contact. 3 days later, on January 30th, 1968, the Israeli submarine Dakar vanished while transiting from Portsmouth, England, to its new home port in Haifa. The former British T-class submarine, recently acquired by the Israeli Navy, was making its maiden voyage under Israeli command when it disappeared somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. The submarine's crew of 69 included some of Israel's most experienced submariners, yet they too vanished without sending any distress signal. The Dakar's disappearance was particularly puzzling because the submarine had been reporting its position regularly throughout the voyage, with no indication of problems. The final transmission, received on January 24th, indicated the submarine was proceeding normally and expected to arrive in Haifa as scheduled. When the Dakar failed to arrive, Israeli naval forces launched an immediate search, but found only a single emergency buoy that had somehow deployed from the submarine, bearing Hebrew text that provided no clues about the vessel's fate. The pattern of simultaneous equipment failure and total loss of communication began to disturb naval intelligence analysts. 2 submarines from different navies, operating in the same sea within days of each other, had both vanished under nearly identical circumstances. The Mediterranean, while occasionally challenging, was well-traveled water with established shipping lanes and frequent naval patrols. The disappearance of two submarines in such a heavily monitored area suggested either extraordinary coincidence or forces that transcended normal maritime hazards. March 8, 1968, brought the third loss when the Soviet ballistic missile submarine K-129 disappeared in the North Pacific. Armed with nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles and carrying a crew of 98, the Gulf-class submarine was conducting a routine deterrent patrol when it vanished approximately 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii. The Soviets launched a massive search operation involving dozens of ships and aircraft, but found no trace of their missing submarine. What made the K-129's loss particularly significant was the submarine's strategic importance and the advanced technology it carried. As a ballistic missile submarine capable of striking targets thousands of miles away, the K-129 represented a critical component of Soviet nuclear deterrent forces. Its disappearance removed not just a submarine but a significant piece of the Cold War strategic balance, yet the circumstances of its loss remained as mysterious as those of the previous submarines. The final submarine loss of 1968 occurred on May 22nd, when the American nuclear attack submarine USS Scorpion disappeared while returning to Norfolk, Virginia, from a deployment in the Mediterranean. The nuclear-powered submarine, carrying 99 crew members, was last heard from on May 21st as it approached the American coast. Like the others before it, the Scorpion vanished without sending any distress signal or providing any indication of the catastrophe that claimed it. The Scorpion's loss sent shockwaves through the U.S. Navy, as nuclear submarines were considered among the most survivable vessels ever built. The submarine's nuclear reactor provided virtually unlimited underwater endurance, while its advanced sonar systems and sophisticated sensors should have detected any approaching threat. The complete absence of distress signals suggested that whatever claimed the Scorpion did so with such speed that the crew had no time to react. Naval investigators began to notice disturbing similarities among all four losses. Each submarine had vanished during routine operations in familiar waters. All had experienced crews operating well-maintained vessels. None had transmitted distress signals or provided any indication of impending disaster. Each disappearance occurred so suddenly and completely that extensive search operations found no initial evidence of the submarine's fate. The possibility of enemy action was extensively investigated but seemed unlikely to explain all four losses. The submarines had disappeared in different parts of the world, operated by different navies during different types of missions. No single adversary had the capability to simultaneously threaten French, Israeli, Soviet, and American submarines across such vast distances. Mechanical failure also seemed an inadequate explanation for the pattern of losses. While each submarine type had its own unique engineering characteristics and potential failure modes, the simultaneous nature of the catastrophic failures suggested either extraordinary coincidence or a common vulnerability that affected submarine design principles shared across different naval traditions. The investigation into these mysterious losses revealed troubling gaps in understanding submarine safety and survival. Despite decades of submarine development and operation, the scenarios that could cause total loss of communication and immediate sinking remained poorly understood. The 1968 losses forced naval architects and safety experts to confront the possibility that submarines faced threats that existing safety protocols and emergency procedures couldn't address. Advances in deep-sea exploration technology eventually led to the discovery of several of the lost submarines, but rather than providing answers, these discoveries often raised new questions. When the Scorpion was finally located on the Atlantic seafloor, the wreckage pattern suggested an internal explosion, but the cause of that explosion remained unexplained. Similarly, the discovery of the Minerve in 2019 revealed a submarine that appeared to have imploded at depth, but the reason for this catastrophic failure could not be determined from the physical evidence. The K-129's fate became entangled in Cold War secrecy when the United States conducted a covert operation to recover portions of the submarine from the Pacific depths. However, the intelligence gathered from this operation has never been fully disclosed, leaving questions about the submarine's loss unanswered decades later. The 1968 submarine losses highlighted the vulnerability of even the most advanced underwater vessels to unknown forces or failure modes. These submarines represented the pinnacle of 1960s naval technology, yet they proved susceptible to catastrophic failures that occurred without warning and left no survivors to explain what had gone wrong. Modern submarine design has incorporated lessons learned from investigating these mysterious losses, with improved emergency communication systems, enhanced escape mechanisms, and more robust hull designs intended to prevent the total loss scenarios that claimed the 1968 submarines. However, the fundamental mystery of what caused 4 different submarines to fail so catastrophically within such a short time frame has never been fully resolved. The phenomenon has led to various theories ranging from the plausible to the exotic. Some researchers have proposed that all 4 submarines encountered similar environmental hazards, such as underwater landslides, methane gas releases, or unusual oceanographic conditions that could cause rapid sinking. Others have suggested that the submarines fell victim to a new form of underwater warfare or surveillance technology that was being tested by an unknown power. More exotic theories have proposed everything from encounters with unidentified underwater objects to sabotage by a coordinated international conspiracy. While these explanations lack supporting evidence, they reflect the difficulty of explaining how 4 submarines from different nations could suffer such similar fates within such a short period. The psychological impact of the 1968 losses extended far beyond the naval communities directly affected. The disappearance of submarines that were supposed to be among the safest and most sophisticated vessels ever built raised fundamental questions about humanity's ability to safely operate in the ocean's depths. If such advanced submarines could vanish without explanation, what did that say about the dangers lurking in the underwater realm? For submarine crews worldwide, the 1968 losses served as sobering reminders of their profession's inherent dangers. Despite all the technological advances and safety procedures, the ocean remained an environment where catastrophic failure could occur without warning or explanation. This knowledge added a psychological burden to submarine operations that persists to this day. The families of the lost submariners faced the particular agony of unanswered questions. Unlike surface ship disasters that might leave survivors or clear evidence of what occurred, submarine losses often provide no closure, no explanation, and no certainty about the final moments of their loved ones' lives. The 1968 losses created hundreds of families left to wonder what force had claimed their sons, fathers, and husbands in the ocean's depths. As we reflect on the mysterious year of 1968, when 4 submarines vanished beneath the waves, we're reminded that the ocean continues to hold secrets that challenge our understanding of underwater operations and marine safety. These losses represent more than statistical anomalies. They highlight the fundamental mystery of what forces can cause the complete and instantaneous destruction of humanity's most advanced underwater vessels. The steel coffins that once prowled the ocean depths in service of their nations now rest on the seafloor, silent monuments to the ocean's power and the limits of human engineering. Their fate serves as a humbling reminder that despite all our technological advancement, the deep ocean remains a realm where the unexpected and inexplicable can still claim even our most sophisticated creations, leaving behind only questions that may never be answered. Story 14. The Hoki Maru Ghost Sounds. Echoes from the Deep. From the mysterious submarine losses of 1968, we now descend to the tropical lagoon of Truk, where beneath the crystal-clear waters of Micronesia lies one of the world's largest ship graveyards, a testament to the fury of World War II's Pacific campaign. Among the dozens of Japanese vessels that rest on the sandy bottom of this natural harbor, one wreck has earned a reputation that extends far beyond its historical significance. The Hoki Maru, a cargo vessel sunk during Operation Hailstone in 1944, has become the source of acoustic phenomena so strange and persistent that they have transformed routine diving expeditions into encounters with the unexplained. Truk Lagoon, now known as Chuck Lagoon, served as Japan's primary naval base in the Central Pacific during World War II. Protected by a ring of coral islands and defended by powerful fortifications, the lagoon housed much of the Japanese combined fleet until February 17 through 18, 1944, when American carrier aircraft launched Operation Hailstone, a devastating surprise attack that sent over 60 ships to the bottom in less than 2 days. The Hoki Maru, a 140-meter cargo vessel, was among the casualties of this assault. Laden with supplies and munitions destined for Japanese outposts across the Pacific, the ship settled to the lagoon floor at a depth of 34 meters, where the warm, Relatively calm waters created ideal preservation conditions. Unlike wrecks in more turbulent seas, the Hoki Maru remained largely intact. Its superstructure and cargo holds accessible to divers who began exploring the site in the 1970s. It was during these early diving expeditions that the first reports of unusual acoustic phenomena began to emerge. Divers working in and around the wreck reported hearing sounds that seemed to originate from within the ship itself. Low-frequency humming, rhythmic pulsing noises, and most disturbing of all, sounds that resembled diesel engines running at idle speed. These auditory experiences were initially dismissed as nitrogen narcosis, or the psychological effects of diving in a war grave. But the consistency and specificity of the reports began to attract serious attention. The engine-like sounds were the most frequently reported and most disturbing phenomenon. Divers described hearing the unmistakable rhythm of a large diesel engine, complete with the subtle variations in timing and tone that characterize mechanical equipment under load. The sounds appeared to originate from the ship's engine room, despite the fact that the Hoki Maru's engines had been silent for nearly 8 decades and were now corroded masses of metal, incapable of producing any mechanical motion. What made these reports particularly credible was their consistency across different diving teams, environmental conditions, and time periods. Experienced technical divers, recreational sport divers, marine archaeologists, and military personnel all reported similar acoustic experiences when diving the Hoki Maru. The sounds were described with remarkable uniformity, a low, throbbing rhythm that seemed to pulse through the water with enough force to be felt as vibrations through diving equipment and the water itself. The phenomenon became so well documented that dive operators began warning clients about the possible acoustic experiences they might encounter at the Hoki Maru. However, rather than deterring divers, these warnings often attracted additional visitors hoping to experience the mystery firsthand. The wreck became a pilgrimage site for those interested in underwater anomalies, creating a steady stream of witnesses to document the ongoing acoustic phenomena. Scientific investigation of the sounds began in the 1990s when marine archaeologists studying the Truck Lagoon wrecks installed underwater recording equipment near the Hoki Maru. The results were both fascinating and disturbing. The hydrophones did indeed detect low-frequency acoustic emissions from the vicinity of the wreck, sounds that occurred in patterns remarkably similar to those described by divers. However, the source of these sounds remained completely mysterious. The recordings revealed acoustic signatures that were clearly artificial in origin, displaying the regular patterns and frequency characteristics associated with mechanical equipment rather than natural phenomena. Spectroscopic analysis of the sound patterns showed harmonics and overtones consistent with internal combustion engines, yet no mechanical source for these sounds could be identified anywhere in or around the wreck. Temperature and current monitoring around the wreck site failed to reveal environmental factors that might explain the acoustic phenomena. The water temperature remained constant, currents were minimal, and seismic activity in the region was negligible. The sounds appeared to have no correlation with tidal cycles, weather patterns, or any other measurable environmental variables. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Hoki Maru sounds is their apparent responsiveness to human presence. Divers report that the acoustic phenomena seem to intensify when people are in the water near the wreck, while becoming less noticeable or absent entirely when the site is unoccupied. This suggested either a psychological component to the experiences, or some form of interaction between the divers and whatever was generating the sounds. The mechanical nature of the sounds led investigators to examine the wreck's physical structure for possible explanations. Thermal expansion and contraction of the metal hull could potentially create acoustic emissions, while the movement of trapped air pockets within the ship's compartments might generate sounds as pressure changes with tidal variations. However, detailed analysis of these possibilities failed to produce acoustic signatures matching those recorded at the site. More exotic explanations began to emerge as conventional theories proved inadequate. Some researchers proposed that the sounds might be caused by the resonance of the ship's hull structure interacting with specific water conditions, creating a form of underwater musical instrument. The complex internal geometry of the cargo holds and engine spaces could theoretically create acoustic chambers that amplify and modify natural water movements into engine-like sounds. The presence of unexploded ordnance throughout the Hoki Maru's cargo holds added another potential explanation for the acoustic phenomena. Chemical reactions within deteriorating munitions could potentially generate gases that create pressure changes and acoustic emissions. However, ordnance disposal experts who examined the wreck found no evidence of active chemical processes that could explain the regular engine-like sound patterns. Marine biology offered another avenue of investigation, as certain fish species and marine invertebrates are capable of producing sounds for communication or territorial purposes. The Hoki Maru's interior spaces provide habitat for numerous marine species that have colonized the wreck over the decades. However, acoustic analysis of the recorded sounds showed characteristics that were inconsistent with known marine animal vocalizations. The psychological aspect of the phenomenon could not be ignored, as the human brain is remarkably adept at finding patterns in random noise and interpreting ambiguous stimuli as familiar sounds. The expectation created by previous reports of engine sounds might predispose divers to interpret natural acoustic phenomena as mechanical in origin. However, this explanation struggled to account for the fact that many first-time visitors to the wreck reported hearing engine sounds before being told about the phenomenon. Electromagnetic factors presented another possible explanation, as the Hoki Maru's steel hull could potentially interact with Earth's magnetic field or underwater electrical currents to produce acoustic emissions. The ship's engines and electrical systems contained significant amounts of ferrous metal that might retain magnetic properties decades after sinking. However, electromagnetic monitoring around the wreck detected no anomalies that could explain the acoustic phenomena. The historical context of the Hoki Maru's sinking added a tragic dimension to the mystery. The ship went down with significant loss of life, and many bodies were never recovered from the wreck. Some observers have suggested that the engine sounds might represent a form of psychic residue or haunting, the spiritual echoes of a ship that died while its engines were still running. While such explanations lie outside the realm of conventional science, they reflect the emotional impact that the acoustic phenomena have on those who experience them. Modern underwater recording technology has captured increasingly sophisticated data about the Hoki Maru sounds, revealing complexity that defies easy explanation. Digital analysis shows that the acoustic emissions contain multiple frequency components that vary in ways consistent with mechanical equipment under changing loads. The sounds display characteristics of Doppler shifting, harmonic resonance, and frequency modulation that suggest a dynamic source rather than simple structural vibration. The phenomenon has attracted attention from researchers studying underwater acoustics, marine archaeology, and anomalous phenomena. The Hoki Maru has become a unique natural laboratory where controlled observations can be made of unexplained acoustic emissions in a documented environment. However, despite decades of investigation and increasingly sophisticated monitoring equipment, the source of the engine sounds remains as mysterious as when they were first reported. For divers who experience the Hoki Maru's acoustic phenomena, the sounds create an unforgettable connection to the wreck's tragic history. Whether the result of unknown physical processes, psychological factors, or something beyond current scientific understanding, the engine sounds transform a routine wreck dive into an encounter with mystery. In the warm, clear waters of Truk Lagoon, the Hoki Maru continues to pulse with sounds that should not exist. A steel monument to both the fury of war and the ocean's capacity to harbor phenomena that challenge our understanding of the possible. Story 15. The Palau Jellyfish Lake Anomaly. Prisoners in a liquid cage. From the haunted engine sounds of the Hoki Maru, we now venture to one of the Pacific's most beautiful, yet subtly dangerous natural wonders. Hidden within the limestone islands of Palau lies Jellyfish Lake, a marine sanctuary that appears to offer swimmers the chance to float among millions of harmless golden jellyfish in an underwater ballet of extraordinary beauty. Yet beneath this enchanting facade lies a complex ecosystem, so delicately balanced and potentially dangerous that it represents one of nature's most deceptive traps, where beauty and peril coexist in ways that challenge our understanding of marine safety. Isle Lake, known universally as Jellyfish Lake, formed approximately 12,000 years ago when rising sea levels flooded a limestone depression, creating a landlocked marine environment cut off from the open ocean. Over millennia, this isolation transformed what was once a typical tropical lagoon into something unprecedented, a closed ecosystem where jellyfish evolved in the absence of their natural predators, developing into docile creatures that appear to pose no threat to human visitors. The lake's most remarkable inhabitants are millions of golden jellyfish, Mastigius papua episoni, that have evolved unique behaviors and characteristics in their isolated environment. Unlike their ocean-dwelling relatives, these jellyfish have largely lost their ability to sting effectively, as the absence of predators removed the evolutionary pressure to maintain potent defensive capabilities. This adaptation created what appears to be a swimmer's paradise, where humans can float among vast swarms of pulsing golden creatures in perfect safety. The daily migration of these jellyfish across the lake creates one of nature's most spectacular displays. Each morning, the entire population moves from the western side of the lake, where they spend the night in deeper water, to the eastern shore to follow the sun's path across the sky. This migration allows the symbiotic algae living within the jellyfish to photosynthesize, providing nutrition that supplements the jelly's diet and maintains their golden coloration. However, this apparent paradise harbors hidden dangers that become evident only to those who venture beneath the lake's thermocline, the distinct boundary layer that separates the warm, oxygenated surface water from the deeper, oxygen-depleted zone below. At a depth of approximately 15 meters, the water chemistry changes dramatically, creating an environment that is not only hostile to marine life, but potentially fatal to human visitors. The deeper waters of Jellyfish Lake contain dangerously high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas that results from the decomposition of organic matter in the oxygen-free environment. This creates a natural stratification where the lake's beauty exists only in the upper water column, while the depths harbor a toxic soup capable of causing serious injury or death to anyone who ventures too deep. The hydrogen sulfide layer presents multiple threats to swimmers and divers. Direct contact with the toxic water can cause severe chemical burns to exposed skin and mucous membranes, while inhalation of hydrogen sulfide gas that may be released at the water's surface can cause respiratory distress and neurological symptoms. Even brief exposure to the deeper water can result in painful burns that persist for weeks and may leave permanent scarring. The lake's unique chemistry also affects the behavior and distribution of its jellyfish population. The golden jellies cannot survive in the toxic deeper waters, creating a natural ceiling that confines them to the upper portion of the water column. This limitation contributes to the dense concentrations of jellyfish that make the lake famous, but it also creates conditions where swimmers may inadvertently push jellyfish down into toxic water, causing their death. Temperature stratification in the lake creates additional hazards for visitors who are unprepared for the dramatic changes in water conditions. The surface water maintains a comfortable tropical temperature, but the thermocline creates a distinct boundary where temperature drops suddenly. Swimmers who dive down through this layer experience rapid cooling that can cause disorientation and muscle cramping, particularly dangerous for those who have ventured into the deeper, toxic water. The biological isolation of Jellyfish Lake has created evolutionary pressures that make its ecosystem extraordinarily fragile. The jellyfish population has no genetic diversity from outside sources and remains vulnerable to environmental changes that would be insignificant in open ocean environments. Temperature fluctuations, chemical contamination from sunscreen or other human-introduced substances, and physical disturbance of the water column can all have cascading effects on the entire ecosystem. Recent climate change effects have begun to destabilize the lake's delicate balance. Rising temperatures and changing rainfall patterns have altered the water chemistry and stratification that maintain the lake's unique characteristics. In 1998, and again in 2016, El Niño events caused the jellyfish population to crash dramatically, with millions of jellyfish dying as the lake's temperature and salinity exceeded their tolerance limits. The recovery periods following these population crashes revealed another dangerous aspect of the lake's ecosystem. Dead jellyfish decomposing in massive numbers created toxic conditions throughout the water column, with hydrogen sulfide and other decomposition products reaching dangerous concentrations even in the normally safe surface waters. During these periods, swimming in the lake became hazardous regardless of depth, as the entire ecosystem struggled to process the massive influx of organic matter. The tourism industry that has developed around Jellyfish Lake creates additional pressures on this fragile ecosystem. Hundreds of visitors per day enter the water, introducing foreign chemicals, disturbing the water column, and potentially spreading diseases or parasites from other marine environments. Even seemingly harmless activities like underwater photography can stress the jellyfish through bright lights and flash exposure. The lake's isolation, which created its unique ecosystem, also complicates emergency response in case of accidents. Medical facilities are limited on Palau, and the remote location of the lake means that serious injuries could require evacuation by helicopter or boat to more advanced medical facilities hours away. For visitors who suffer hydrogen sulfide burns or other chemical exposure, this delay in treatment can significantly worsen the ultimate outcome. Research into the lake's ecosystem has revealed complex interactions between the jellyfish, their symbiotic algae, bacterial communities, and the unique water chemistry that maintains the system's stability. Any disruption to these relationships can trigger cascading effects that may take years to resolve. The jellyfish depend on their algae for nutrition. The algae require specific light and chemical conditions, and the bacterial communities that process organic matter are essential for maintaining the water chemistry that allows the entire system to function. The apparent docility of the lake's jellyfish masks subtle dangers that become evident only through close observation. While the jellyfish have lost much of their stinging ability, they retain enough nematocysts to cause mild irritation in sensitive individuals. More significantly, the stress of human interaction can cause the jellyfish to release mucus and other defensive chemicals that can trigger allergic reactions in some swimmers. The lake's unique acoustic properties create another subtle hazard. The confined space and specific water chemistry produce unusual sound transmission characteristics that can disorient swimmers and mask the sounds of distress calls. Voices carry differently in the lake environment, and the psychological effects of swimming among millions of pulsing jellyfish can contribute to disorientation and panic in susceptible individuals. Modern monitoring of Jellyfish Lake has revealed that its ecosystem operates on cycles and patterns that are still not fully understood. The jellyfish population fluctuates based on factors that extend far beyond the lake itself, including ocean temperature patterns, rainfall cycles, and possibly even solar radiation variations. These discoveries highlight how interconnected the lake is with global environmental systems, despite its apparent isolation. For scientists studying evolution and ecology, Jellyfish Lake provides a unique window into how isolated populations adapt to extreme environmental constraints. The rapid evolutionary changes observed in the jellyfish population demonstrate how quickly species can adapt when faced with novel environmental pressures. However, the same isolation that drives rapid adaptation also creates extreme vulnerability to environmental changes. Conservation efforts for Jellyfish Lake face the challenge of balancing scientific research, tourism revenue, and ecosystem protection in an environment where any disruption can have dramatic consequences. Visitor quotas, restricted access areas, and chemical-free swimming requirements represent attempts to minimize human impact, but the lake's fragility means that even minor disturbances can trigger major ecosystem disruptions. The beauty of Jellyfish Lake continues to attract thousands of visitors annually, drawn by the unique opportunity to swim among creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth. Yet this natural wonder serves as a powerful reminder that the ocean's most spectacular environments are often its most fragile, requiring careful stewardship to preserve their beauty for future generations. In the warm, golden waters of this limestone sanctuary, millions of jellyfish continue their ancient migration, unaware that they exist in a liquid cage where beauty and danger intertwine in ways that challenge our assumptions about natural safety. Their evolutionary prison has become a window into the ocean's capacity to create wonders that are both magnificent and perilous, reminding us that paradise often comes with hidden costs that may not be apparent until it's too late to avoid them. Story 16. The Goblin Shark Encounters, Living Fossils from the Abyss. From the deceptive beauty of Palau's Jellyfish Lake, we now venture into the crushing darkness of the deep ocean, where creatures from prehistory continue to patrol waters that have remained unchanged for millions of years. In the abyssal depths off Japan, the Gulf of Mexico, and scattered deep-water locations around the world, encounters with one of evolution's most nightmarish creations continue to terrify commercial fishermen and deep-sea researchers alike. The goblin shark Mitsukurina austoni represents a living link to the Cretaceous period, a 125-million-year-old design for killing that has remained so effective, it has required no evolutionary improvement. The goblin shark's appearance defies comprehension, combining familiar shark characteristics with alien features that seem designed by a malevolent imagination. Growing to lengths exceeding 12 feet, these deep-sea predators possess flattened, elongated snouts that extend far beyond their mouths, giving them an unmistakably demonic appearance that earned them their common name. The snout, technically called a rostrum, houses an elaborate network of electroreceptors that can detect the faintest electrical impulses generated by potential prey in the eternal darkness of the deep ocean. But the goblin shark's most terrifying feature is revealed only when it feeds. Hidden beneath the elongated snout lies a set of jaws that can extend forward with explosive force, projecting beyond the shark's head to seize prey with shocking speed and violence. This protrusible jaw mechanism, powered by specialized musculature, allows the goblin shark to strike at targets beyond the reach of conventional predators, creating a feeding apparatus unlike anything else in the modern ocean. The extension of these jaws creates one of the most horrifying sights in the marine world. The shark's mouth literally shoots forward, revealing rows of long, needle-like teeth designed for grasping rather than cutting. The combination of the extending jaws and the alien appearance of the elongated snout creates a visage so disturbing that even experienced marine biologists report being shocked by their first encounter with a feeding goblin shark. Historical accounts of goblin shark encounters date back centuries in Japanese fishing folklore, where these creatures were known as tenguzame, named after the long-nosed demons of Japanese mythology. Fishermen working the deep waters off Japan's coast reported hauling up creatures so strange and terrifying that they were often thrown back immediately, considered too ominous to bring to shore. These early encounters established the goblin shark's reputation as a harbinger of misfortune among deep-sea fishing communities. The goblin shark's habitat contributes significantly to its mysterious reputation. These creatures inhabit the bathypelagic zone, typically found at depths between 330 and 4,300 feet, where sunlight never penetrates and pressure reaches crushing levels. This deep water environment has remained largely inaccessible to human exploration until recent decades, allowing goblin sharks to evolve and hunt in isolation from surface-dwelling creatures for millions of years. Modern encounters with goblin sharks typically occur when deep-sea fishing operations or scientific research accidentally bring these creatures to the surface. Commercial fishing nets deployed at extreme depths occasionally capture goblin sharks, providing researchers with rare opportunities to study these elusive predators. However, the trauma of rapid decompression during ascent often kills the sharks before they can be studied alive, limiting scientific understanding of their behavior and ecology. The few living goblin sharks that have been successfully brought to the surface for study have demonstrated behavior patterns that are both fascinating and disturbing. When threatened or agitated, these sharks can extend their jaws repeatedly, creating a rapid-fire attack mechanism that appears almost mechanical in its precision and violence. The speed of jaw extension, measured at over 10 feet per second, generates enough force to inflict severe injuries on anything within range. The goblin shark's feeding strategy reflects its role as an ambush predator in the deep ocean environment. Rather than actively pursuing prey like many surface sharks, goblin sharks appear to hover motionless in the water column, using their elaborate electroreception system to detect the approach of potential victims. When prey comes within range, the explosive extension of their jaws allows them to capture animals that might otherwise escape into the darkness. This feeding mechanism poses theoretical dangers to deep-sea divers and submersible operations, though actual attacks on humans remain undocumented. The goblin shark's jaws are powerful enough to penetrate diving suits and could potentially cause fatal injuries to underwater personnel. However, the extreme depths where these sharks typically operate make encounters with human divers extremely unlikely under normal circumstances. The goblin shark's evolutionary stability over millions of years suggests a design so perfectly adapted to its environment that natural selection has found no reason to modify it. This prehistoric perfection makes the creature both a scientific marvel and a reminder of the ocean's capacity to preserve deadly efficiency across geological timescales. The teeth and jaw structure of modern goblin sharks are virtually identical to fossilized remains from the Cretaceous period, indicating that these predators have been perfecting their killing technique for over 100 million years. Recent advances in deep-sea exploration technology have begun to reveal more about goblin shark behavior and ecology. Underwater cameras deployed at abyssal depths have captured rare footage of these creatures in their natural habitat, showing hunting behaviors and social interactions that were previously unknown to science. These observations reveal that goblin sharks may be more common in deep-water environments than previously thought, with populations potentially numbering in the thousands in suitable habitat areas. The discovery of juvenile goblin sharks in relatively shallow waters off some coastlines has raised questions about the species' life cycle and potential for human encounters. Young goblin sharks, while smaller than adults, possess the same extending jaw mechanism and represent a previously unknown shallow water phase of the species' development. These discoveries suggest that goblin shark encounters may become more frequent as human activities expand into deeper coastal waters. The goblin shark's unique physiology creates additional concerns for deep-sea operations. The species appears to be particularly sensitive to pressure changes, with rapid ascent causing tissue damage and behavioral changes that make handling extremely dangerous. Captured goblin sharks have been observed to enter feeding frenzies when stressed, repeatedly extending their jaws and attempting to bite anything within reach, including research equipment and containment vessels. The biochemistry of goblin shark tissue has revealed compounds and proteins that are uniquely adapted to high-pressure, low-temperature environments. Some of these biological adaptations may have applications in medical research or biotechnology, but studying them requires capturing live specimens from depths that challenge current technology. The few successful research programs have provided insights into deep-sea physiology while highlighting the dangers of working with creatures evolved for such extreme environments. Commercial fishing operations in areas known to harbor goblin sharks have developed specific protocols for handling accidental captures. These procedures emphasize immediate release whenever possible, as goblin sharks that survive the trauma of capture and ascent often die within hours despite attempts at rehabilitation. The economic value of goblin shark specimens for research or aquarium display has created a black market trade that threatens populations while providing minimal scientific benefit. The goblin shark's role in deep-sea ecosystems remains poorly understood, but evidence suggests these predators play crucial roles in maintaining balance among deep-water marine communities. Their ability to capture prey that other predators cannot reach makes them apex predators in environments where food sources are scarce and competition for resources is intense. Disruption of goblin shark populations could have cascading effects on deep-sea ecosystems that are already under pressure from climate change and human activities. For marine researchers studying the evolution and ecology of deep-sea predators, goblin sharks represent both an invaluable scientific resource and a formidable challenge. These living fossils provide direct links to prehistoric marine ecosystems, offering insights into predatory strategies that have remained effective across millions of years of environmental change. However, the extreme difficulty and danger of studying these creatures in their natural habitat means that much about their biology and behavior remains mysterious. The psychological impact of goblin shark encounters extends beyond their immediate physical threat. The creature's alien appearance and explosive feeding mechanism trigger primal fear responses that affect even experienced marine professionals. Deep-sea fishermen report that encounters with goblin sharks create lasting anxiety about working in abyssal waters, while researchers describe the creatures as embodying humanity's deepest fears about what lurks in the ocean's unexplored depths. Recent climate change effects on deep-sea environments may be altering goblin shark distribution and behavior patterns. As ocean temperatures rise and current patterns shift, these ancient predators may be forced to adapt to changing conditions for the first time in millions of years. Early evidence suggests that some goblin shark populations are moving to different depth ranges or geographical areas, potentially bringing them into contact with human activities in previously safe waters. The goblin shark's unique evolutionary position makes it particularly vulnerable to environmental changes that might force rapid adaptation. Having remained essentially unchanged for over 100 million years, these creatures may lack the genetic flexibility to respond quickly to novel environmental pressures. This evolutionary stability that has been their greatest strength could become their greatest weakness in a rapidly changing ocean. Modern deep-sea mining operations pose new threats to goblin shark populations while creating potential for dangerous encounters. Mining equipment operating at abyssal depths could disturb goblin shark hunting grounds and feeding areas, while the noise and vibrations from heavy machinery might attract these predators to industrial sites where accidents could occur. The goblin shark's sensitivity to environmental changes makes them particularly vulnerable to the disruption caused by large-scale deep-sea operations. The discovery of goblin shark tooth marks on deep-sea mining equipment and submersible hulls has raised concerns about the species' aggressive potential when territorial boundaries are violated. While these incidents have not resulted in human casualties, they demonstrate that goblin sharks will investigate and potentially attack unfamiliar objects in their environment. The power of their extending jaws is sufficient to damage pressure hulls and life support systems, creating serious risks for deep-sea operations. The goblin shark's electroreception capabilities, which allow it to detect electrical fields generated by living organisms, may also make it sensitive to artificial electrical signatures from human technology. Deep-sea equipment operating in goblin shark habitat could inadvertently attract these predators or trigger aggressive responses that endanger both the sharks and human operators. This electromagnetic sensitivity adds another layer of complexity to safe operations in deep water environments. As we continue to push the boundaries of deep-sea exploration and exploitation, encounters with goblin sharks will likely become more frequent and potentially more dangerous. These living relics of the Cretaceous period serve as reminders that the deep ocean harbors predators whose evolutionary perfection has been tested and refined over geological timescales. Their extending jaws and alien appearance represent not just ancient predatory efficiency, but also the ocean's capacity to preserve and perfect designs for killing across millions of years. The goblin shark stands as perhaps the most compelling evidence that the deep ocean remains an alien world where creatures from Earth's distant past continue to hunt and feed according to rules established long before human existence. In the crushing darkness where these prehistoric predators patrol their eternal domain, we encounter not just another marine species, but a living link to times when Earth's oceans were ruled by forms of life so perfectly adapted to their environment that evolution itself found no reason to improve upon their design. For those who venture into the abyss, whether in submersibles, diving bells, or remote-operated vehicles, the goblin shark represents the ultimate reminder that in the deep ocean, we are visitors in a realm where the residents have been perfecting their predatory skills for over 100 million years. Their extending jaws and nightmare appearance serve as warnings that some corners of our planet remain as alien and dangerous as any extraterrestrial environment we might encounter among the stars. Story 17. The Frost Flowers Phenomenon. Arctic Blooms of Death. From the prehistoric nightmares lurking in the abyss, we now journey to the opposite extreme of the marine environment, the pristine, seemingly sterile surface of Arctic sea ice. Here, in conditions so harsh that life appears impossible, nature has created one of its most deceptive and dangerous phenomena. Frost flowers, delicate crystalline formations that bloom across newly formed sea ice like an ethereal garden, represent one of the most beautiful yet potentially lethal spectacles in the polar regions. These ephemeral structures, which appear to be nothing more than harmless ice crystals, harbor concentrated toxins and aggressive microorganisms capable of causing severe respiratory damage and death to anyone unfortunate enough to encounter them without proper protection. Frost flowers form under very specific atmospheric conditions that occur only in the Arctic and Antarctic when new sea ice encounters extremely cold, calm air. As seawater freezes, it expels salt and other dissolved substances, creating a concentrated brine that remains liquid even at temperatures well below the normal freezing point of water. When this supercooled brine encounters the frigid air above the ice surface, it begins to sublime directly from liquid to vapor, creating delicate ice crystals that grow upward from the sea ice in formations that resemble exotic flowers or coral structures. The beauty of these formations is undeniable. Frost flowers can grow to heights of several inches, creating intricate crystalline gardens that span miles across the polar ice surface. Their delicate branching structures catch and reflect light in ways that create spectacular displays of natural artistry. Early Arctic explorers often describe these formations as among the most beautiful sights in the polar regions, comparing them to frost-covered gardens or fields of crystal flowers blooming in the world's most inhospitable environment. However, this beauty conceals deadly secrets that have only recently been understood by science. The brine that creates frost flowers is not simply concentrated seawater, but a toxic soup containing salt concentrations up to 10 times higher than normal ocean water, along with concentrated heavy metals, organic pollutants, and most dangerously, aggressive microorganisms that have adapted to survive in these extreme conditions. The formation process of frost flowers creates ideal conditions for concentrating and preserving dangerous substances. As seawater freezes, it acts as a natural distillation process, expelling salt, toxins, and microorganisms from the ice matrix and concentrating them in the remaining liquid brine. This concentration effect can increase the toxicity of the brine by orders of magnitude, creating chemical cocktails that would be immediately dangerous to human health. The microbial communities that thrive in frost flower brine represent some of the most extreme organisms on Earth. These bacteria and archaea have evolved to survive in conditions of extreme cold, high salinity, and intense ultraviolet radiation that would kill most other life forms. Many of these microorganisms produce toxins as byproducts of their metabolism, adding biological hazards to the already dangerous chemical composition of the frost flower environment. Recent research has revealed that frost flowers serve as launch platforms for aerial dispersal of toxic particles and microorganisms. As the delicate ice crystals sublime in changing weather conditions, they release concentrated aerosols containing the accumulated toxins and pathogens from the brine. These aerosols can travel hundreds of miles on Arctic winds, creating invisible clouds of toxic particles that pose serious health risks to anyone in their path. The respiratory hazards posed by frost flower aerosols are particularly severe. The high salt content can cause immediate irritation and inflammation of the respiratory tract, while the concentrated toxins can cause chemical burns to lung tissue. The microbial components add the risk of serious infections, including pneumonia and other respiratory diseases caused by extremophile bacteria that are resistant to conventional antibiotics. Arctic researchers and indigenous communities have begun to recognize the health risks associated with frost flower exposure. Personnel working on sea ice during frost flower formation periods have reported severe respiratory symptoms, including burning sensations in the throat and lungs, persistent coughing, and difficulty breathing. In severe cases, exposure has resulted in chemical pneumonia, requiring emergency medical evacuation from remote Arctic locations. The timing and distribution of frost flower formation make them particularly dangerous for Arctic operations. These formations typically occur during the coldest periods of the Arctic winter, when medical evacuation is most difficult and weather conditions limit rescue operations. Remote research stations, military installations, and indigenous hunting parties may encounter dangerous frost flower conditions without immediate access to medical care or the ability to evacuate affected personnel. Climate change is altering the frequency and intensity of frost flower formation in ways that may increase their danger. As Arctic ice formation patterns change and new areas of open water appear during traditionally frozen periods, conditions for frost flower formation are occurring in previously stable ice regions. This expansion of frost flower habitat increases the likelihood of encounters between these toxic formations and human activities in the Arctic. The ephemeral nature of frost flowers adds to their danger by making them difficult to predict and avoid. These formations can appear overnight during periods of rapid ice formation and calm weather, creating hazardous conditions in areas that were safe just hours before. Conversely, frost flowers can disappear just as quickly when weather conditions change, leaving behind no visible evidence of their former presence while dispersing their toxic contents into the atmosphere. The chemical composition of frost flower brine varies significantly based on the underlying seawater chemistry and local environmental conditions. In areas affected by industrial pollution or military activities, frost flowers can concentrate these contaminants to dangerous levels. Heavy metals, petrochemicals, and radioactive materials can all become concentrated in frost flower formations, creating localized toxic hazards that persist long after the ice structures themselves have sublimed. The interaction between frost flowers and atmospheric chemistry creates additional hazards that extend far beyond the immediate formation sites. The aerosols released by subliming frost flowers can serve as condensation nuclei for cloud formation, potentially spreading concentrated toxins across vast areas through precipitation. This atmospheric transport mechanism can carry Arctic pollutants to populated areas thousands of miles away. Modern Arctic operations now include frost, flower detection, and avoidance protocols, but the unpredictable nature of these formations makes prevention challenging. Weather monitoring systems can identify conditions favorable for frost flower formation, but the actual presence and distribution of these structures often cannot be determined without direct observation. This uncertainty forces Arctic operators to assume dangerous conditions exist whenever environmental factors align for frost flower formation. The biological warfare potential of frost flower aerosols has attracted attention from researchers studying natural dispersal mechanisms for extremophile microorganisms. The ability of these formations to concentrate and launch viable microorganisms across vast distances represents a natural bioaerosol system that could potentially serve as a model for understanding how life might spread between planets, survive in extreme extraterrestrial environments. Personal protective equipment designed for frost flower environments must address both chemical and biological hazards while functioning in extreme cold conditions. Standard Arctic gear is often inadequate for protecting against the fine aerosols and concentrated toxins associated with frost flower exposure. Specialized respiratory protection and chemical-resistant outer garments are required for safe operations in affected areas. The indigenous knowledge of Arctic peoples includes traditional warnings about bad ice and dangerous snow conditions that may represent centuries-old awareness of frost flower hazards. Traditional hunting and travel practices often include avoidance of newly formed ice areas during specific weather conditions, suggesting that the dangers of frost flowers have been recognized long before their scientific study began. For atmospheric scientists and climate researchers, frost flowers represent a significant but poorly understood component of polar atmospheric chemistry. These formations may play crucial roles in Arctic cloud formation, ozone depletion, and the transport of pollutants between ocean and atmosphere. However, the health risks associated with studying frost flowers directly limit research opportunities and slow scientific understanding of their environmental impacts. The crystalline beauty of frost flowers continues to attract photographers and nature enthusiasts to the Arctic, often without awareness of the serious health risks these formations pose. Educational efforts to raise awareness of frost flower dangers face the challenge of convincing people that something so beautiful and apparently harmless could pose serious threats to human health. As Arctic shipping routes open and resource extraction activities expand in polar regions, encounters with frost flowers will become increasingly common. The development of safe operating procedures and protective equipment for frost flower environments represents a growing challenge for Arctic industries and emergency responders. The combination of extreme environmental conditions and toxic chemical hazards creates safety scenarios that push the limits of current protective technologies. In the pristine landscape of the Arctic, where beauty and danger often coexist in unexpected ways, frost flowers serve as a reminder that nature's most spectacular displays sometimes mask its deadliest traps. These delicate crystal gardens, blooming in Earth's most extreme environment, embody the ocean's capacity to create wonders that are simultaneously magnificent and malevolent, challenging our assumptions about the relationship between beauty and safety in the natural world. Story 18. The Hadal Zone Amphipods, giants from Earth's deepest trenches. From the toxic crystal gardens of the Arctic surface, we now plunge to the absolute depths of our planet, descending through miles of crushing water to reach the Hadal Zone, Earth's final frontier. Here, in the deepest oceanic trenches, where pressure exceeds 1,000 times that at sea level and eternal darkness reigns supreme, live some of the most alien and potentially dangerous creatures ever discovered. Giant amphipods, crustaceans that have evolved to thrive in conditions that would instantly crush any surface-dwelling organism, represent not just biological marvels, but potential harbors for pathogens and biochemical compounds so unusual they challenge our understanding of life's limits and dangers. The Hadal Zone, named after Hades in reference to its hellish conditions, encompasses the deepest 5% of the ocean, found primarily in oceanic trenches that plunge to depths exceeding 6,000 meters. These environments represent some of the most extreme conditions on Earth, where crushing pressure, near-freezing temperatures, and complete absence of light create a realm as alien as any extraterrestrial world. Yet within these seemingly impossible conditions, life has not merely survived, but flourished in forms that defy conventional biological understanding. Among the most remarkable inhabitants of these abyssal depths are the giant amphipods, crustaceans related to the small beach hoppers found along shorelines worldwide, but evolved to gigantic proportions in the pressure cooker environment of the deep trenches. While their shallow water relatives rarely exceed a few centimeters in length, Hadal amphipods can grow to lengths exceeding 30 centimeters, creating armored giants that roam the deepest seafloor like underwater tanks. The discovery of these giants occurred during some of humanity's most ambitious deep-sea exploration efforts. When research vessels first deployed specialized landers into trenches like the Mariana, Japan, and Izu Ogasawara, they encountered swarms of these oversized crustaceans that challenged everything scientists thought they knew about life's limitations. The amphipods appeared not as struggling survivors barely clinging to existence, but as dominant predators, perfectly adapted to their extreme environment. The size of Hadal amphipods represents an evolutionary phenomenon known as abyssal gigantism, where creatures in extreme deep-sea environments grow to proportions far exceeding their shallow water relatives. This gigantism appears to result from the unique environmental pressures of the Hadal Zone, where extreme pressure, cold temperatures, and limited food sources create evolutionary pressures that favor larger body sizes and specialized feeding mechanisms. The anatomy of these giants reveals adaptations that border on the alien. Their bodies are covered in thick, flexible exoskeletons that can withstand crushing pressure while remaining mobile enough for active predation. Their appendages are equipped with specialized hooks and crushing mechanisms that allow them to process food sources unavailable to smaller organisms. Most unsettling are their feeding behaviors, which include aggressive scavenging and cannibalistic tendencies that make them formidable predators in their lightless domain. Recent deep-sea expeditions have captured disturbing footage of Hadal amphipod feeding frenzies, where hundreds of these giants swarm over food sources in aggressive displays that rival any surface predator. When bait is deployed in amphipod habitat, the response is immediate and overwhelming, with massive individuals engaging in violent competition for access to nutrition. The speed and aggression displayed during these feeding events demonstrate that these creatures are far from the sluggish scavengers that early researchers expected to find. The potential dangers posed by giant amphipods extend beyond their impressive size and aggressive behavior. Research has revealed that these creatures harbor unique microbial communities, adapted to the extreme conditions of the Hadal Zone. These microorganisms include species capable of surviving pressures and temperatures that would kill virtually all known pathogens, yet they remain biologically active and potentially dangerous if introduced to surface environments. The biochemistry of Hadal amphipods reveals compounds and metabolic pathways that have never been encountered in surface organisms. Their bodies contain specialized proteins that maintain cellular function under crushing pressure, along with unique enzymes that process organic matter in ways impossible at surface pressures. Some of these biochemical adaptations involve the production of compounds that are toxic to conventional marine life, suggesting that giant amphipods may use chemical warfare as part of their predatory strategy. The discovery of live specimens has proven extremely challenging due to the technical difficulties of bringing deep-sea creatures to the surface alive. The rapid decompression experienced during ascent from Hadal depths typically kills amphipods before they can be studied, while their aggressive behavior makes handling dangerous, even for specialized equipment. The few successful captures have revealed behavioral patterns that suggest these creatures possess intelligence and social organization uncommon among crustaceans. The feeding ecology of giant amphipods has revealed their role as apex scavengers in the Hadal ecosystem, capable of processing organic matter that settles into the trenches from the surface world thousands of meters above. However, their diet also includes active predation on other deep-sea organisms, and evidence suggests they may engage in cannibalistic behavior during food shortages. This opportunistic feeding strategy makes them potential vectors for pathogens and toxins that accumulate in the deep-sea food web. The reproductive biology of Hadal amphipods remains largely mysterious, but limited observations suggest breeding strategies that maximize survival in the resource-poor environment of the deep trenches. Females appear to invest enormous energy in producing small numbers of large, well-developed offspring, capable of surviving the extreme conditions from birth. This reproductive strategy may contribute to the species' success in the Hadal Zone, while also limiting population recovery if disturbed. Recent research has revealed that giant amphipods may play crucial roles in Hadal Zone carbon cycling, processing organic matter that settles from surface waters and converting it into forms that can be utilized by other deep-sea organisms. This ecological function makes them keystone species in environments where every calorie of energy is precious, but it also means they concentrate toxins and pollutants that sink to the ocean floor. The potential for Hadal amphipods to serve as disease vectors has become a growing concern, as deep-sea exploration and exploitation increase. These creatures' ability to survive extreme conditions while harboring diverse microbial communities makes them potential reservoirs for pathogens that could pose serious threats if introduced to surface environments. Their longevity and slow metabolism mean they could harbor infectious agents for extended periods without showing symptoms. Climate change effects are beginning to reach even the deepest oceanic trenches, potentially altering the stable conditions that have allowed Hadal amphipods to evolve their extreme adaptations over millions of years. Changes in surface productivity, ocean chemistry, and temperature gradients could disrupt the food sources and environmental conditions that support these unique ecosystems, with unpredictable consequences for both the amphipods and the pathogens they harbor. The biomechanical properties of giant amphipod exoskeletons have attracted attention from materials science researchers studying pressure-resistant structures. The ability of these creatures to maintain structural integrity under crushing pressure while remaining flexible enough for rapid movement represents a biological engineering solution that could inspire new approaches to deep-sea vehicle design and protective equipment. Military and security organizations have begun to study Hadal amphipods as potential models for developing autonomous systems capable of operating in extreme environments. The creature's ability to navigate, hunt, and survive in conditions that challenge the most advanced human technology makes them natural prototypes for designing equipment capable of functioning in hostile environments on Earth or other worlds. The discovery of giant amphipods in multiple Hadal zones around the world suggests that abyssal gigantism may be a widespread evolutionary response to extreme deep-sea conditions. Each trench system appears to harbor its own unique species of giant amphipods, indicating rapid speciation and adaptation in isolated deep-sea environments. This diversity implies that numerous unknown species remain to be discovered in unexplored trenches. For deep-sea researchers and explorers, giant amphipods represent both scientific treasures and potential hazards. Their alien biology and extreme adaptations provide insights into life's limits and possibilities, while their aggressive behavior and potential pathogen load create safety concerns for deep-sea operations. The challenge of studying these creatures safely, while preserving their unique ecosystems, continues to push the boundaries of deep-sea technology and protocols. As humanity ventures deeper into the ocean's most extreme environments, encounters with giant amphipods serve as reminders that the deepest parts of our planet harbor life forms as alien as any we might encounter in space. These armored giants of the Hadal Zone, thriving in pressures that would crush submarines and temperatures that would freeze surface life, represent evolution's ultimate adaptation to extreme conditions. In the crushing darkness of Earth's deepest trenches, where the weight of the entire ocean presses down from above, these prehistoric-looking crustaceans continue their ancient dance of survival and predation. They remind us that life's ingenuity knows no bounds, creating forms of existence so specialized and extreme that they challenge our understanding of what it means to be alive on our planet. The giant amphipods of the Hadal Zone stand as living proof that in the ocean's most impossible places, life doesn't just endure. It thrives, grows, and evolves in ways that humble our comprehension of biology's potential. Story 19. The Porthleven Beach Disappearance, when paradise vanished overnight. From the crushing depths where giant amphipods patrol the Hadal trenches, we now return to the familiar coastlines, where humans have built their lives beside the sea, assuming the permanence of landscapes that have existed unchanged for generations. In 2018, the residents of Porthleven, a picturesque fishing village on Cornwall's rugged coast, awoke to discover that their beloved beach had vanished completely overnight, leaving behind only bare rock and bewildered questions about how thousands of tons of sand could simply disappear without explanation. Porthleven Beach had been a cornerstone of the community for centuries, a crescent of golden sand nestled between dramatic cliffs that provided protection from the Atlantic's fury, while creating a haven for fishing boats, tourists, and local families. The beach had weathered countless storms, survived the battering of winter gales, and endured the erosive power of waves that had shaped Cornwall's coast for millennia. Its stability seemed as permanent as the granite cliffs that embraced it, making its sudden disappearance all the more shocking and inexplicable. The discovery occurred on the morning of March 15, 2018, when local residents taking their usual dawn walks along the waterfront found themselves staring at an alien landscape. Where wide expanses of sand had stretched the previous evening, only dark bedrock remained exposed, scarred and angular in the harsh morning light. The transformation was so complete and dramatic that many witnesses initially questioned whether they were looking at the same location they had known their entire lives. The speed of the sand's disappearance defied all conventional understanding of coastal erosion and sediment transport. Beaches typically lose sand gradually over months or years, with visible changes occurring incrementally as waves and currents redistribute sediment along the coastline. The overnight nature of Porthleven's transformation suggested forces at work that operated on entirely different timescales and mechanisms than normal coastal processes. Local authorities and coastal engineers arrived to investigate what appeared to be an unprecedented geological event. Initial surveys confirmed that approximately 2,000 tons of sand had vanished from the beach in less than 12 hours, with no corresponding accumulation of sediment in nearby areas. The sand hadn't simply moved down the coast or been redistributed to other local beaches. It had apparently been removed from the coastal system entirely. Weather conditions on the night of the disappearance had been relatively calm, with moderate winds and normal tidal ranges that provided no obvious explanation for such dramatic sediment movement. While winter storms regularly reshaped Cornwall's beaches, the conditions during Porthleven's sand loss were typical of countless other nights that had passed without incident. The absence of extreme weather made the event even more puzzling for experts attempting to understand what had occurred. The investigation revealed unusual tidal patterns in the hours leading up to the sand's disappearance. Tidal monitoring stations recorded subtle anomalies in water level and current direction that didn't correspond to predicted astronomical tides or known atmospheric influences. These variations were slight but persistent, suggesting the presence of oceanographic forces that weren't accounted for in standard coastal models. Sonar surveys of the offshore area revealed disturbing changes to the underwater topography that had occurred simultaneously with the beach's disappearance. The seafloor showed evidence of recent sediment disturbance, extending far beyond the normal zone of wave action, with scour marks and erosional features that suggested powerful currents had operated at depths where such forces shouldn't exist under normal conditions. Most puzzling was the discovery of what appeared to be perfectly circular depressions in the seafloor, arranged in geometric patterns that seemed too regular to be natural formations. These features, approximately 10 meters in diameter and up to 3 meters deep, showed signs of recent formation and were concentrated in areas where the missing sand would have been deposited if normal sediment transport processes had been operating. The community impact of the beach's disappearance extended far beyond the immediate visual shock. Porthleven's economy depended heavily on tourism, fishing, and maritime activities that required the beach's protective and functional presence. Without the sand buffer, storm waves began attacking the seawall and harbor infrastructure directly, causing damage that threatened the community's economic foundation and physical safety. Local fishing operations faced immediate practical challenges, as the exposed bedrock made beach launching of small boats impossible. Generations of fishermen had relied on the sand beach for hauling boats above the tide line, and the rocky surface that remained was too dangerous and irregular for traditional launching techniques. The economic disruption rippled through the community, as fishing activities were forced to relocate to more distant harbors. Environmental monitoring revealed that the beach's disappearance had triggered cascading ecological effects throughout the local marine ecosystem. The exposed bedrock created different wave reflection patterns that altered coastal hydrology, while the absence of sand habitat affected marine organisms that depended on soft-bottom environments for feeding and reproduction. The changes disrupted established food webs and migration patterns that had remained stable for decades. The mystery deepened when witnesses reported unusual phenomena in the days following the sand's disappearance. Several residents described seeing lights beneath the water offshore during nighttime hours, while fishermen reported sonar anomalies and unusual water movements that didn't correspond to known current patterns. These accounts, while difficult to verify, suggested that whatever had caused the sand's removal might still be active in the area. Scientific analysis of water samples taken from the area revealed chemical signatures that were inconsistent with normal seawater composition. Elevated levels of certain minerals and trace elements suggested that deep water had been brought to the surface, possibly through previously unknown upwelling mechanisms. The chemical evidence pointed to oceanographic processes that were unprecedented in the area's recorded history. Then, as suddenly and mysteriously as it had vanished, the sand began to return. Over the course of several nights in early April, witnesses reported seeing the beach gradually reform as sand mysteriously reappeared on the rocky shore. Time-lapse photography captured the extraordinary process of the beach rebuilding itself through mechanisms that remained as inexplicable as its original disappearance. The return of the sand followed patterns that defied conventional sediment transport models. Rather than washing ashore randomly with tides and waves, the sand appeared to be deposited in organized layers that reconstructed the beach's original profile with remarkable precision. The process suggested a level of organization and control that seemed impossible for natural coastal processes. Analysis of the returned sand revealed composition changes that added new mysteries to the phenomenon. While the sand appeared visually identical to the original beach material, laboratory analysis showed subtle differences in mineral composition and grain characteristics. Some particles showed signs of exposure to high pressures and temperatures that couldn't be explained by normal surf zone processes. The speed of the beach's restoration was as remarkable as its original disappearance. Within 2 weeks, Porthleven Beach had returned to almost exactly its original form, with sand distribution and profile matching historical surveys with uncanny accuracy. The precision of this restoration suggested either extraordinary natural processes or intervention by forces that remained unidentified. Geological surveys following the beach's return revealed that the underlying bedrock showed evidence of recent modification that hadn't been present before the sand's disappearance. Tool marks and surface changes suggested that the seafloor had been altered by equipment or processes that left no other traces. These modifications appeared designed to facilitate the rapid movement of large volumes of sediment, though no known technology could accomplish such work at the observed scale and speed. The Porthleven Beach disappearance and restoration have become subjects of intense scientific study, with researchers attempting to understand oceanographic processes that could account for such rapid and complete sediment transport. Various theories have been proposed, ranging from previously unknown current systems to seismic activity that temporarily altered seafloor topography. However, none of the conventional explanations adequately account for all aspects of the observed phenomena. Climate change effects on coastal dynamics have provided one avenue for investigation, as changing storm patterns and sea levels could potentially create new forms of sediment transport. However, the specific conditions at Porthleven don't match predictions for climate-driven coastal changes, and similar events haven't been observed at other locations. With comparable exposure to changing ocean conditions, military and industrial activities in the area have been investigated as possible causes of the sediment disruption. Large vessels or underwater construction projects could theoretically mobilize significant quantities of sand, but no such activities were documented in the area during the relevant time periods. The investigation into human causes has been hampered by the remote location and limited surveillance of offshore waters. The psychological impact on the Porthleven community has been profound and lasting. Residents report feeling vulnerable and uncertain about the stability of their coastal environment, with many expressing anxiety about the possibility of future disappearances. The event has challenged fundamental assumptions about the permanence of familiar landscapes and the predictability of natural processes. For coastal engineers and planners, the Porthleven incident has highlighted gaps in understanding about extreme coastal processes and the potential for rapid environmental changes that exceed design parameters for coastal infrastructure. The event has prompted reviews of coastal defense strategies and emergency response protocols for scenarios involving rapid landscape change. The tourism industry has experienced mixed effects from the beach's mysterious behavior. While some visitors have been deterred by uncertainty about the coast's stability, others have been attracted by the mysterious nature of the event and the opportunity to witness an unexplained natural phenomenon. The incident has become part of local folklore and tourism marketing, though underlying concerns about environmental stability remain. As we conclude our journey through these dangerous ocean mysteries, the vanishing beach of Porthleven serves as a fitting reminder that even the most familiar and seemingly stable aspects of our relationship with the sea can change without warning. In a single night, A landscape that had existed unchanged for generations was erased and then mysteriously restored, demonstrating the ocean's capacity to surprise us, even in places we thought we understood completely. The Porthleven Beach disappearance embodies many of the themes that have emerged throughout our exploration of maritime mysteries. The ocean's power to confound our expectations, the limits of our understanding of marine processes, and the humbling reminder that we share our planet with forces that operate according to rules we may never fully comprehend. As the sand of Porthleven Beach once again welcomes visitors and fishing boats to its restored shore, it carries with it the memory of its mysterious absence, a silent testament to the ocean's endless capacity for wonder and mystery. In our modern world of satellite monitoring and instant communication, where we assume that every corner of our planet has been mapped and understood, the Porthleven phenomenon reminds us that the ocean still holds secrets that can manifest in the most unexpected places and ways. The sea continues to write its stories in sand and stone, tide and current, creating mysteries that challenge our understanding and remind us that we are still learning to read the language of the waves.